What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Lost Records Journal podcast, Play One vs. Lost Records Focus podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Adnan Riaz. My co-host, Adam Evalt, is here. Adam, you here?
I am here. I am inked up and I'm ready to go.
You are. You're inked up. You're ready to go. Because obviously we just had Michel and Luke on for a podcast. We just had Ruth Radley on for a podcast, and that was just myself. But Adam's back now because we have the wonderful Sam Bradley, who's Don't Nod Montreal's art director. Sam, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yes.
We're really happy to have you on here. We're really excited because obviously we love the artwork. We love everything you did on this project, and it's so excited to kind of talk to you about this. And obviously we also found out that you listened to the podcast, and it made our life a lot easier because we're like, we don't have to do all the explanation stuff, which is quite nice. But no, we're really excited to have you on here because I think, you know, what you guys did behind the scenes on the art stuff is just really, really remarkable. And there's just so many little things I want to pick your mind about because I've just been catching up on things. But before we start as well, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, share with your friends. And Lost Records Journal is available on all podcast services, so go and check us out there. We're on Spotify with the video version. I'm really condensing that as well because I hate doing it. It kills my cell every time because it's a YouTube part. But Sam, I'm going to start with you and just kind of show you some things. I'm not going to go into the who is Sam Bradley cliche question. I'm just going to ask you something else. So bear with me as I read this. So this quote, and it says, I can talk about this topic endlessly. And first of all, thank you for saying that. It's one of those things when I trust when other people say that, but from my point of view, genuinely, I can't see it. And the reason is that when I was younger, it was something I was super, super hung up on. And I think it wasn't until I let go of the pressure, like finding my style. It wasn't until that point people started saying this to me. So that is you on the Creative Theory podcast in April 2022. This is just months before you joined Don't Nod Montreal. And you are talking about your distinct art style, or someone or the host says to you that they noticed your distinct pattern and you were like, I'm not too sure, I didn't see that. And then, you talk about JC, is it JC Linedecker as well? And time in art school. So I'm just curious as well, 3 years on from that, you're now the art director at Don't Nod Montreal. Do you see your distinct art style now, or are you still in the same place?
I for sure do not see it the way other people do, but I can acknowledge, that the people around me who do see it are responding to it genuinely, right? I feel like for me, it's interesting. Yeah, you did some deep dive to find that quote, by the way. That's great. And, something that I think that has continued to progress since that interview is that for me, there was a period when I was younger where I was like, I guess pretty hung up on trying to figure out what my art style would be. And the more I thought about it, the more I got into my head about it. And I think it kind of stunted my artistic growth a little bit because it was something that seemed like a really big deal to my then young artist self who was trying to figure out who I was. And now, I just really don't engage with that idea a whole lot anymore. And I think because I don't, the style has sort of developed on its own. So I think my struggle to see it isn't for a lack of it being there. It's just that I'm not spending the effort to try to see it. I'm just kind of letting it happen, and it's cool that it is happening, but I feel like I'm personally anyways better off as an artist not worrying about it too much and sort of just letting it bubble up to the surface, letting it evolve on its own. That voice is there and other people recognize it. And I feel like if I were to really, put it under a microscope again and be like, okay, what is my style? I might start to get in my head about it again. So yeah, it is there. But I feel like for me, it is much less of a thing that I concern myself with than it was 15 years ago in art school when it was like a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And just to bleed into that as well, because I'll take a Patreon question here. This is from Kevin Lackner, and KJL said, "Where do you find your inspiration?"
Oh my gosh, this is a really big question. I feel like, and we can maybe break it out a little bit if you guys want to, because I feel like it comes from different places for different contexts, right? Like to speak to my own inspirations versus the kind of inspirations that inspire the work that I'm doing for, my career. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty wide range. For me as a person, though, I feel like taking inspiration from real life is so important for me. Trying to find sort of like the purest form of anything, I feel like is the best place for inspiration. And what I mean by that is that I feel like if I spend too much time only being inspired by other artists, there's this chance that things start to feel like a photocopy, like just a slightly less good version of a thing that already exists, or something that maybe the idea behind what has inspired me isn't 100% understood, but then retranslated. So a little bit of the essence gets lost. And I feel like for me, the best way to avoid that sort of photocopy effect is, the real world, like getting out there, interacting with people, seeing places, having experiences, and doing my best to try and capture the memory of that in my head, the way that those things make me feel, so that eventually when it's time to channel that into artwork, it's fresh and to some degree original anyways. Not to say that I'm
Mm.
not inspired by other artists though. I mean, I can go on and on. You can see behind me there's a ton of art books back there.
Yeah.
I have a massive art book collection, and so the easiest answer actually is, if I have no inspiration, I spin my chair 180 degrees and I've got a bit of a library back there with an endless font of inspiration. Yeah, and then when it comes to work stuff, and maybe we can talk about specifics later, but yeah, it really depends on the type of project, the collaboration, the subject matter, how I'm interacting with other artists. There's such a wide range of different fonts of inspiration for creative collaborations. So yeah, it's one of the reasons actually I like working in this sort of industry where everyone is working together is I'm often also surprised by things that end up being inspirations. I get introduced to things by people that I'm working with that I never would have discovered on my own, and end up becoming, pretty large inspirations for the work.
Nice.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Please.
I have a serious vendetta against the phrase that's been going around like TikTok, Instagram, and I feel like it's only just like this algorithmic world that's people only say this. Create more than you consume. I have a vendetta against that because it kind of points into this direction that don't consume other people's work, don't consume art around you, don't consume, just create. And I feel like that's going into a direction of a capitalistic roundabout, just like make content for the
Yeah.
algorithm. Don't consume it, just make it. I consume so much music just to get me inspired. You said you have art books behind you just to inspire.
Yeah.
What is your take on the whole catchphrase, create more than you consume?
Just
Yeah, it's a weird
before
one,
you
right?
answer
Oh,
that as well, I think
sure.
as well, just to add on to that as well, you don't put advertisement like pieces on your website, do you? Because like commission driven ones. I was listening to the podcast. You saying that you don't like it's all pure art form. You don't make like specific commercialized pieces and you don't put them on your website, just to kind of add into that. Is that right?
Until very recently. So until the last 6 months or so, I went onto my website and I started putting client work on there for the first
Mm.
time ever. And
Mm.
the reason for this, I was pretty conflicted about it, and it does sort of relate to both of those questions. For the longest time, you could see the work that I was doing for studios on my social media, my Instagram, when I was on Twitter, on there. But I've started to like walk back the time and energy that I spend engaging with social media. Obviously, I'm still on there. It's how I, first connected with you guys. I'm still scrolling Instagram maybe a little bit more than I should, but I at one point, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, hit the eject button from Twitter, and a few years before that from Facebook. And both of the times that I did this, I felt like it was a really positive boost in terms of my mental health. It was like the social
Mm.
Yeah.
media was having an influence on me that wasn't great. But because of that, and especially when I stopped using Twitter, there ended up just being no place to see a lot of the work that I had done for clients. And the reason I had this separation between personal work and professional work, and it was a pretty hard line on my website where it was only personal work, is that I feel like a lot of the best creative collaborations I've had have actually come from people getting excited about the things that I do, as opposed to
Mm.
the things that I have done for other people. And I don't even remember who, but somebody told me very early on in my career that if there's something you want to do and something you want to be hired for, and there's work you want to do, make
Mm.
sure that that is the work that you're showing to people.
Mm.
Because if you're showing other things, guaranteed, if you're unhappy with something but you're showing it because you got paid to do it, someone else is going to hire you to do that thing you don't want to do, right? So
Yeah.
my mentality was have this website full of my own art that eventually, in theory, someone is going to stumble across this. They're going to like what I do. They're going to like my voice, my style, to come back to that previous question, and they're going to want to collaborate with me for that, as opposed to having me emulate something I had done that someone else, had directed me to do on a previous project. But yeah, as soon as I got rid of my Twitter, I just realized that there was people out there reaching out. They wanted to see that art that I had made, and there was nowhere to see it online. So my current thinking is that there is now like a personal art section and a professional art section on my website, and it's good enough. I think I'm not as like hardcore about it as I was when I was younger as well. I think my opinions were a little more black and white, and I have, as I've gotten older, realized there's room for nuance in there. I can have a website that is a gallery of my own work that people can get excited about, but then they can scroll and click on professional work and see, some of the client work that I've done on there as well. And sorry, part two, to answer this question, you were asking about, create more than you can consume, or sorry, create more than you do consume. I feel like it is sort of this like rise and grind sort of mindset that overlaps with this, right? And it is sort of the world of content that we live in now. Yes, like feed the beast, because it is endlessly hungry and there always needs to be more, more, more. And I think it's different for everyone. Honestly, you know, I can see why for some people maybe that works for them. But for me, I feel like there's so many valid reasons to consume what other people are doing. One, first of all,
Yeah.
I'm just a fan. You know, there's like tons of artists and creative people out there in the world that I love, you know, people who are making movies, making music, making games, writing books. And I just like enjoy those things. It's a nice way for me to disconnect and recharge after a long day. You know, I'm not even necessarily always going there to be inspired. You know, I'm not trying to like eat that up so that I can regurgitate it later. It's just it's a pleasurable thing for me to like curl up with a book for half an hour before bed, and you know, maybe those ideas eventually find their way into my work in the future, but maybe they don't, and that's fine. Yeah, and for me, I feel like I need to try and be mindful about maintaining a balance though, because I do get like, when it comes to my work, pretty intense. You know, I go pretty hard at times, and it's also a good opportunity to, you know, step back and treat myself to, you know, watching a season of TV or something like that. If, you know, there's been an especially intense period of time, either in my personal art or, you know, time at work when things are getting wild, it's nice to have a little bit of an opportunity to hit reset and just enjoy what other people are making. Yeah, hopefully that does that answer your question? Is that sort of
Oh yeah,
Oh,
it's
yes.
like it's the balance rather than just like you said, when you're younger, you just have such a black and white mentality. There's nuance to consume. And I think people only say that because there's so much content to consume now than ever before. So now they have to put up this guardrail of saying, like, create more than you consume. But at the same
right?
time, a lot of my music was inspired by just listening and watching shows and seeing art and just consuming that, getting stained by it, and like, oh, I got this idea because I consumed. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It's the whole internet is so black and white nowadays. It's just
it really
it's
is.
There's nothing wrong with being black and white. I'm just going to say that. Maybe that's just where I'm at in my life. But Sam, no, it's fascinating to hear your perspective. And obviously, I'd love to keep. I think we could do a 3-hour expose just on your like your perspective on art, because I think it's fantastic. But I kind of want to bleed it into somewhere, because obviously we had the gaffers on, Michel and Luke, recently. You went and worked at Don't Nod Montreal in 2022. Tell us about that process. How did you get involved there, and how did you get involved in the studio and then become the art director as well?
Sure. Yeah. It was really like a strange, unexpected confluence of events that brought me to Don't Nod. If you could go back in time 10 years ago and tell me that this would be the job that I would be doing around the time that I discovered Life is Strange 1, I would never in a million years believe you, right? Because when I first discovered Don't Nod, through Life is Strange, I was a big fan right away. Maybe similar to you guys, like I really connected with the first game, and then probably even more so the second game. They just found me at the right time and place in my life. But for me at the time, an artist working then in film, living in Canada, seeing video games being created by a studio in Paris, you know, it's a different industry, a different continent, and a different language. It wasn't even a thing like, oh, maybe one day I can work there, because there was no path. You know, there were so many walls. It would be like for me to say, you know, if you were to tell me a year from now I was going to be working at Studio Ghibli, it's just like there was no road to how something like that could align, right? But then a few things happened. First of all, you know, COVID happened, which meant that a lot of artists all of a sudden began to be able to work remotely, which was a really new thing for the creative industry. You know, for a long time, it was like you're at a desk in a studio working elbow to elbow with your fellow creatives, and you know, the world has changed dramatically in that regard, obviously, in the last 5 or 6 years. And then Don't Nod Montreal happened. You know, the core team, Life is Strange folks, from Paris to Montreal to start a new studio, which again is something that, like, as an outsider, you know, I didn't know anyone who was working there, sort of followed along from a distance, you know, like other fans of the studio did, but had no idea that they were looking to relocate. And then in my own life, I had been approached to work in the video games industry sort of unexpectedly. I had been working on a film, and my composer, he had scored some video game soundtracks, and that's actually how I discovered his work. Like, I was a big fan of some of the video game music he had done. So I was working on a film, and I reached out and said, hey, I love your music. Can we collaborate on some animation together? And he was stoked. So we worked together for a while, and it just so happened that there was a video game he was working on at the same time. And he had my film up on his screen when the creative director of a this video game called Jet.
Yep.
Walked into his studio to say, hey, we gotta make some music together, and saw a little bit of my film, and he was like, oh, what is this? Who is this guy? And so I got put in touch through my pal Jim, the composer, with the team at Super Brothers. And so from that, it was like an unexpected backdoor entry into the video games industry for me, which was at the time super exciting because I've always been a gamer my whole life, but had never really considered it. At the time I was very much like, I'm working in film. But yeah, I was a huge fan, and they reached out, and so I went and ended up art directing and doing concept art for this game called Jet the Far Shore. And so the very long answer short to your question is, as I was wrapping up art directing on that, I saw a post on Instagram. Actually, we're back here again. This is why I got to get my Instagram from Lucille, who was the pre-production art director at Don't Nod at the time for the project that was about to go on. And she was saying that she needed some help with concept art. And so then I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. This is a post in English. What is this project even? I would assume this would just be for people in Paris, So there was a little bit more information, and I slid into her DMs, and I was like, hey, look, I'm wrapping up art directing this other game. Big fan of Don't Nod. You can actually still see it if you scroll far enough on my back in my Instagram. You'll see some fan art I made of Max in like 2017 or something like that. So I had a little bit of like legit cred where I could tell her, hey, look, I'm a real fan. You can see some of my Life is Strange fan art on there. Yeah. And she got back to me. And so I started out freelancing as a concept artist. And I feel like I was doing that so like the 2022 is when I started art directing. And I feel like I started as a concept artist in probably mid 2021 ish, I would guess. I don't know the exact date, but probably like 6 or 8 months before that. Yeah. And then at a point, Lucille ended up leaving the project. And it was funny, actually. I had been doing some freelance concepts, and it was going well, but it was like very piecemeal because it was super early in the project. So it was kind of like, we're figuring out the story. We're not really sure of a lot of things, but we do know these little bits of what would eventually become Bloom and Rage. And so, hey, Sam, can you paint something like this and like this and like this? And I worked on a few things for a few months, and then there was like radio silence. And so I was like, oh, maybe, life as a freelancer, this often happens where, you're working with someone, you're collaborating, you get pretty far, some cool stuff happens, and then, for whatever reason, things end. And yeah, so I was kind of like grinding away for a few months, and then sent some work in, and they're like, oh, we'll get back to you a few weeks, and I wasn't hearing anything back. And I was like, okay, well, it was cool. I got to work with Don't Nod, like bucket list collaboration checked off the list. And then, like 2 months later, where it was almost to the point where I was like starting to forget about the project, I got an email from Luke, and he's like, hey, can we hop on a call? And so I got on a call with him and Michel, and they were like, hey, look, sorry, we haven't been in touch recently, but we've been, organizing the team. And it turns out we're going to need an art director for production. And we loved working with you as a concept artist. Do you want to shift into that role? So I was very caught off guard because I thought, we had sort of like fulfilled the creative collaboration that we had set out to do. And then all of a sudden I was on a call getting the offer to art direct the project. And so I was thrilled at that point because, like I said, there was no way for me to imagine ending up at this studio whose work I really admired and playing an integral role in one of their future projects. But yeah, the world just happened to spin in my favor in this one. So part luck, part timing, part hopefully, I assume good work. They were happy with what I was doing, and they wouldn't have offered me the position if they weren't. So yeah, it was like I said, strange, but fortuitous confluence of events. It sure is. Yes, absolutely.
See, here I was thinking that you went to Lucille like, look at my dog. Look at the name there. This is what's actually getting me the job. That's what I was thinking you were going to do.
Yeah. So I know that Luke spoiled this story, but it is true. My dog is named Mushroom for fans of Life is Strange 2, R.I.P. Mushroom. Yeah, and I was actually like quite embarrassed about this when I first connected with the team. I had rescued my pup from Mexico probably like 6 or 8 months before I had spoken to Lucille or anyone else on the team. And yeah, my partner and I had just finished playing Life is Strange 2 together, and we needed a name. And her name when we fostered her was pretty similar. So we were like, oh, we still miss and love Mushroom from Life is Strange. Why don't we just do that? And my dog definitely is very much a mushroom. It is the perfect name for her. Yeah. And then so when I connected, for months, my dog would wander in behind me on the call, and I'd be like, isn't my pup so cute? But I wouldn't say her name. And it was like months in where I was like, guys, I have a confession. And it was like so awkward, but they all thought it was great. I remember Luke telling Jean-Luc about it and Michel talking about it as well. And part of the reason why I eventually caved is I wanted to know why they named their dog Mushroom. So I could understand why my dog was named Mushroom. Yeah. So eventually it all came out and everyone thought it was funny that I had hid it from the team for
Good.
so long.
I
Nice.
have two follow-up questions to your story. My first question, you said your composer's friend was named Jim. You're not talking
Yeah.
about Jim Guthrie, right?
Jim Guthrie. Yeah,
No
he is a good pal of
way,
mine.
dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, I connected with him because the music he made for Sword and Sorcery. I don't know if you guys have played this game or familiar with it, but all-timer soundtrack for me. Love, love, love that soundtrack. And yeah, I
And
was making an
Below.
animated film. Yeah, but yeah, his work on Below is so good. Oh
Oh,
my God.
so good, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All of his work with Cappy all of his work in general, but his Cappy work especially, I love. Yeah, and Sorcery was just a soundtrack that I went back to a lot and continue to still listen to. And so when I was making my film, his music
Yeah.
was just in my head. Maybe, just to rewind for a second, the inspiration topic for me, I feel like a thing that I do regularly is I try to find inspiration in sort of adjacent but different areas. So when I was working on this film that I was making, I made a soundtrack that really captured the feel and the mood of the kind of art that I wanted to be drawing. And I would just loop that soundtrack for hours while I was drawing. So I wasn't referencing anything visually, but there was a tone in my head. And a few of Jim's songs were on that soundtrack. And they're burned into my brain
Yes.
at this point from hearing them over and
Oh,
over while I
so
was
good, dude.
storyboarding this film. Yeah. And so I just shot him an email. And I was like, hey, I'm making this thing. Can I show you some art and pitch you an idea? And conveniently, he's here in Toronto with me. We live in the same city. So we met up for
I was gonna say
coffee
he's
and I showed
Canadian. Yeah.
yeah. So, and then, yeah, we become pals. So he was the one who introduced me to the Super Brothers team. And yeah, the last time I saw him was just a couple of months ago. We don't get together as much as I would like, but we still keep in touch and hang out every
So
now and then.
I'm completely jealous of your work. Not only you're high-fiving Luke Baghadoust, but you're hanging out with Jim Guthrie and
Yeah.
scientific. It's just
Yeah.
like, dang, I gotta move to Canada. This is just unfair. But
I've been very lucky to collaborate with some cool folks, that's for sure.
the other question I have, and this like really resonates with me as well. I tell people all the time that like art school is just one direction. It's just one of many directions, and we get to hear from other people in the video game industry that have different stories of how they more or less stumbled into the industry. I always say that like you can go to art school or you can just connect with people. What do you say to people that say like, what is the path I need to take to achieve my goals of getting into said industry, film, music, whatever it is?
I don't think there is one specific road. And I feel like, yeah, as I've continued to grow in my career and, the last few years, especially some of the projects that I've worked on have been the kinds of projects that I think up and coming artists would be really enthusiastic to take part in. I get asked this question a lot. And I think it's tricky because sadly, well, maybe not sadly, it's kind of like, it's kind of exciting, but there isn't really a step A, B, C to getting to these places, right? I think a big part of how to find success that is aligned with who you are as a creative is to really find a way to do the things you love and show them to people. And I think do the things you love, part of that really depends from person to person. You mentioned art school versus being self-taught. And I've met people who have followed both of those roads and really, succeeded and found the path that they were looking for by taking both of those starting points, right? I feel like people who go to art school have the benefit of building connections and having a community. I went to art school and, I graduated 2007, so almost 20 years since I've been out of art school. And I
Dang.
still keep in touch with some of my besties from college, more than once I can think of times where they have helped me find work. I have helped them find work. Speaking about inspiration, having a group of peers to come up alongside of really great. It helps motivate you when you see other people who are, really stepping their game up. You feel like you need to step your game up. In that sense, it's awesome. But I have other friends, no art school at all. And there are a lot of benefits to that as well. Like art school is, especially now, 20 years ago it was expensive. Now it's insanely expensive. Like the tuition for school,
Yeah.
it's unreal. And, with the internet now, there's so many opportunities to connect with professionals who are more than willing to teach you outside of a formal school
Yeah.
environment, right? So many really talented artists. Maybe you would know better than me. I don't know if it's the same for music, but for art, there are so many people who are, at the top of their field and they have like a Gumroad or a Patreon, and you can go on there and learn the fundamentals of how they became who they are. And this was a thing that was never something I would have even imagined would be possible when I was in art school, right? So there are so many
Yeah.
ways to access this far fewer barriers to like, yeah, get really, really close to the people who are doing the best work out there. And these are the kinds of people you want to be learning from, right? So
Mm.
and especially people are really self-motivated. I feel like school for me was really good because when I started studying, I didn't have a lot of self-discipline. It was hard for me to build a routine and get my work done. And just being in an environment that had some structure taught me how to do that. It was one of the most important skills that I learned really in school, was just how to self-direct and be self-motivated. But I
Mm.
didn't have that when I started. If I were to meet a young artist though, who is, super motivated and driven on their own, that to me would be a good sign to encourage them to potentially explore options other than school. Because if you can, like really set your mind to something and work hard and focus and keep yourself on track, there's no reason why you can't achieve the same things that most people are coming out of art school doing without having to go through, the process of formal schooling or spending all that money. So yeah, there's I don't think there's a right way. And then
Yeah.
the follow-up question you had there about like ending up in a position like this, it's the same kind of thing. Like for me, like it was this weird winding path that took me in an unexpected route. If you were to ask me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what I thought I would have been doing now,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have been this, but this is amazing. Like I feel like being willing to see a door open and not be shy to potentially deviate your path a little bit when a good opportunity
Yes.
arises, and doing your best to also, a lot of people say right place, right time, and I think that is true, but the reality is that you can put yourself in the right place a whole bunch of times and eventually it will be the right time, right?
Mm.
The half of that equation is in the control of the person trying to navigate and chart their course, right? And so it's not always
Yes.
the right time, but you can keep putting yourself in the right place, and then eventually the stars will align. If you put yourself in the right
Mhm.
place enough time, it will be the right time for you. But yeah, it's often
Yeah.
when you least expect it.
I think about that all the time. Like I moved from Fargo to Raleigh, and like what 7 months ago, and now I'm about to go into a indie game showcase where I'll be representing 3 games I provided music for.
So cool.
That's what I mean. It's just like going to the right place, that being Raleigh, where all the game developers are. And I always say that like life is a gamble, so put yourself in a lucky spot. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
Be honest. Fargo was not the lucky spot at all.
Okay.
Lucky for cold, but that's about it.
So I was disappointed that you didn't say name your cat Pippin and then getting Michel's DMs to get into art school or some kind of job opportunity. I'm just going to put that out there. But no, it's very interesting
Yeah,
perspective to see how you've mapped that out, because I think art is so difficult now and how to get into some certain fields. Like music was so open many years ago, and same with art as well. And now it's just quite some of the routes are narrow, but it's fascinating to hear your perspective. And I've taken a big chunk of Lost Records topic to talk about, but before we start with that, I'm going to take another Patreon question. And this is from
sure.
Kevin Kestis, and they said, "What was your favorite location or scene to bring to life in Lost Records?"
Ooh.
Oh, my favorite. Oh boy. I feel like I want to pick a favorite, but I maybe will talk through a couple just because I had a hand in a few of them. And
Mm.
I don't know who's my favorite child. It's a tricky
Yeah.
one.
Was it
I
the
feel like,
cabin dance scene?
pardon me?
Was it the cabin dance scene?
Everyone loves the cabin dance scene. How can you go wrong with that cabin dance scene? Admittedly, though, I will say a lot of the look of that dance scene, obviously due to Michel. He was quite had a big
Yeah.
hand in how that was going to come together. To no one's
It was very
surprise, right?
Michel Koch. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I feel like the blue spruce was a big one for me because that was the first assignment that I got when I joined the project as just a concept artist, right? So, yeah, my first few months working on the project, when I met with Lucille, she basically said, "Would you be more interested in working on garage or a small town bar?" And I told her that I grew up in a small town and my mom was a waitress at my uncle's small town bar. So I probably would be able to nail the vibe if she sent me in that direction. And so she was like, perfect. You know the content. Let's see what you can do. And so, yeah, I kind of dove in headfirst to the blue spruce. So that one I feel like is, yeah, pretty near and dear to me. Also because it went through a lot of evolution, because it was really maybe it was the first environment that we really dug into in terms of art. Yeah. And then, it plays such an important role throughout the whole game. We constantly come back to it. I feel like Swann's bedroom was another big one. Some of the environments that we designed in the game took a lot of iteration and exploration, and from initial idea to what ended up in the finished product changed dramatically. But for whatever reason, Swann's bedroom, we just seemed to hone in on in a surprisingly easy way. I made a couple of thumbnails and a painting, and everyone was stoked about them. And the environment team took my rough concepts and really, really plus the space. And again, it's another environment where we come back to a whole bunch of times. So I had the pleasure of working with our lighting team to set up the moods
Mm.
of each of those return visits, which is, a big part of the space. And the collaboration that I have with the lighting team is great. So that, yeah, I'm very fond of that one. And then the third one that I think really stands out to me is Kat's bedroom, just because the scenes that take place in there
Mm.
are so emotional, right? I mean, I feel like what I did for that space, sets a stage, but really what everyone else did for the moment with Kat and Swann. And I will, like you said, avoid getting too into spoilers, but in tape 2, there's
Oh, no, you can go
a
into spoilers, sorry. You're fine to go into spoilers.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, then for people who've played the game, I'm sure most people will remember there's a very emotional scene that happens with Kat and Swann in Kat's bedroom. And yeah, so for me, that one is special because I was excited about the concept art that I had made and the space that we had planned out, but then to see all of the work from the designers and writers and the music in that scene, everything all come together, and Michel kind of playing conductor in there to have all of the bits connect together. And it is, yeah, it's such a beautiful scene. I feel like it's one of the most emotional ones for me when I play the game, so it was cool to have a hand in bringing that bit of the story to life. I don't know.
Nice.
So all that to say, if you made me
Yeah.
choose, I guess I would choose Blue Spruce. But yeah, either
Yes.
we can even get more into it because all the locations, really, it's the part of the project that maybe I was most closely involved with. I worked super closely with the environment team, and a lot of the art. When you scroll through all the stuff that I may have shared on social media, so much of it is environment related, right? So I have stories about
Mm.
I would assume every environment in the game. So yeah.
And funnily enough, that was the big topic part I was going to bring in because I was going to take you to the Mikaelsen Ranch, and I was going to specifically
Oh, cool.
focus on the masks because you started posting
Mm,
concept art for them and they were quite detailed and obviously people love them. And I kind of want to just focus on each of the character ones to start with. So I think the first one was like Nora's, is obviously because well, a lot of people thought it was a raccoon mask, but it turned out to be a badger mask.
yeah.
Intentionally badger. And then what do you think about the reaction when people thought it was a raccoon as well?
I feel like they're equally sassy animals, so I have no problem with the raccoon slash badger confusion. Yeah, and in terms of Nora's mask, this one was a really fun one to design. I guess the idea in the lore, in the fiction, is that while they're all wearing different masks, Nora is the one who is sort of like the artist of the group, right? So she is the
Mm.
one who is making the masks, or at least helping everyone make the masks. There's a scene in the garage where there's a little bit of environmental storytelling where you can see the supplies that they had gathered together to make the masks sitting on a workbench in Nora's garage, right? So there is like an in fiction sort of explanation that she is the one crafting these, and so to make hers was pretty fun because it was cool to imagine her making it for herself and just being indulgent and being Nora and making it the way that she would like to make it. And I feel like it was cool the way that we had designed the mask, but then also painted her face to sort of align with the details on the
Yeah.
mask. And the big punk rock pink mohawk was a cool touch. We didn't give any of our characters any crazy hair, so this was our opportunity to like turn the hair dial up to 11 for a minute there with her mask. Yeah.
And
Dang.
interesting enough as well, Kat, I've always wanted to ask you this as well because obviously Michel did interview rounds. He went and spoke to Bonus Action, and the cat mask stood out for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Raven's symbolism and stuff, but very eerily similar to Chloe Price's mask in Deck Nine's Life
Right.
is Strange Before Storm. I got to ask you, was that some inspiration part of it? Was Chloe Price part of the inspiration because we see nods within the game? Raven is quite associated with her because of Before Storm, but did you think about Before the Storm and say, hey, this mask looks cool, or is it just pure coincidence that happened?
Yeah, it is coincidence, but we did notice it internally before the game released. I don't remember who it was, but someone on the team did at some point say, "Hey, did you realize?" And I have played Before the Storm, and I quite liked it actually. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. It is very similar." And I think that if I had realized that while I was designing Cat's mask, I maybe would have hesitated. And so I'm glad that I didn't, because
Mm.
similar or not, I'm really happy and proud with how Cat's mask turned out. Actually, it maybe I shouldn't play favorites, but if it maybe is my favorite of the masks. It's just
Yeah.
it turned out really good. It fits the mood of the scenes it's in really well. We had the trailer for tape 2 that came out with the burning
Mm.
deer, and you see Cat in her mask, and it's just so dramatic. Like, it just turned out really, really good. The character team did such a good job of taking the concept and like making it look amazing when they turned it into the 3D asset and had Cat wearing it. So yeah, I'm glad that the work on my side was done by the time I realized the similarities, because like I said, I might have been a bit iffy about riffing so directly on what they had done. But that said, I don't mind that there's a similarity there. Like I said, I played that game and I liked that game, and I feel like, even though Kat and Chloe, obviously very, very different characters, I can see why fans might look at one and the other and want there to be some overlap there. Even aside from the topic of the masks, actually, it's been really interesting to see, the hardcore Life is Strange fans look at Lost Records and what we're doing and draw comparisons, because sometimes, those are intentional, and other times it's just fans seeing a connection that they would like to be there. And I'm even hesitant to confirm or deny which specific ones I'm thinking about right now, but there are ones that fall into both categories. And
Yes.
what I like about art in general is that when you put something out into the world, it becomes its own thing. While we're working internally on a project, we have specific intents and ideas and things we're trying to communicate and things we're trying to be clear about and other things we're trying to be maybe a little bit opaque about. But there's no way to really know for sure how people are going to receive a thing and feel about a thing. And then when it goes out into the world, it really does become its own entity, And so people are going to see things that are intentional and people are going to see things that are unintentional. And I don't think either of those things are right or wrong. It's just how fans are consuming it. You think of the way your favorite song makes you feel and the emotions you associate with it. I like that happens with our game. People see it and they're like, oh, clearly it means this. And as the person who made it, I was like, that is not at all what it means, but it's so cool that is what it means to you. And to me, that is equally as valid whether or not I had planned it. So yeah, for the mask specifically, was not an intentional nod to that, but I'm actually pretty glad about how it all turned out, and it is cool to see a little bit of parallel there.
Yeah, and for
Yes.
sure as well. Do you know the beak where it says "See you in hell"? Was that your touch?
So yeah, not only that, we didn't do this a lot, but we did for some of the key textures. I wrote it for real, on paper, and then scanned it in. So the "See you in hell" on the beak, I pitched the idea and then I tried to do it digitally and it just wasn't working. So I got out a big old faded magic marker and a piece of cardboard. And so I wish if I had known, I could have prepped it to show you guys, but I've written "See you in hell" 15 times. It looks like the kind of note you would find in a serial killer's basement. But I scanned it all in and then cut it all up so all the letters fit properly onto the beak. But yeah, there is a random piece of cardboard with those words scribbled all over that I've kept as a little keepsake for Kat's mask.
That is very cool. But no, it's interesting to hear
Yeah.
your perspective where you said it, even interpretation with art, because there's that old debate about the scream. Is that person hearing a scream or is it person screaming? And same with
Yeah.
Mona Lisa. Why is the Mona Lisa smiling? Is she hiding one of Da Vinci's secrets or something? Interpretation is always interesting. And I really want to dig in with this one because I think that the autumn wolf mask is probably the most complicated, because I just kind of went into a bit more of a rabbit hole recently before I was going to ask you, because wolves aren't necessarily aggressive and attack worthy creatures, but this mask is it's got half of it, you got the art underneath a neck to kind of match the mask. And then, it's got blood on it, for example. So it's kind of a little bit of an aggressive mask. But then obviously when you speak to Michelle's she's almost like the matriarch of that group, that she's like the wolf pack leader, to kind of protect everyone. I'm just kind of curious your perspective on when you were making that mask, because was it with Corey in mind, for example? Because Corey is also wearing the mask. So obviously the blood and thing would be reflective of him. And then even more so because you're a Life is Strange 2 fan. I only recently found this as well, in terms of connecting dots. Sean Diaz is the Wolf brothers, Sean and Daniel Diaz. Is there even that part of the inspiration you thought, actually, I like wolves for this reason to kind of come into this mask?
Yeah, I mean, the idea for it being a wolf specifically, this was from Michel. And so for me, this one was kind of maybe the easiest and the hardest one to make in terms of art. The hardest one, I think, because for all of the other ones, there wasn't this dual purpose that was required, right? There were just constraints that we had from the start, knowing where that mask would start and where it would end, right? With Autumn first and then with Corey. So it was challenging to make sure that it would serve two very different purposes equally well, but easy in the sense that, Michel was like, it's for sure going to be a wolf mask. And because of those constraints, it was very easy for me to tell if it was working or not. So it was hard to get it in the pocket. But then once it was, there wasn't a lot of is this right? Is it not? 10% more or less badger, raccoon. We could do that with all of the other ones. It's let's, noodle it here and there just to get it feeling just right. And with hers, it was okay, it's working for this scene with Autumn, and then we know where it's going to go with Corey, and we're seeing him do what he needs to do with it, and it's working. It's like, okay, at this point, it was very easy to do a temperature check and know that we had succeeded once we finally got to that point. So yeah, that one was very different than the rest because it did have this dual purpose. And yeah, like you're saying, Autumn is sort of like the pack leader of the group, so the wolf made a lot of sense for that. But then for Corey's scene, it needed to work in a way where it could serve a much different but equally dramatic sort of purpose, right? Yeah. And so coating it with colors as well for Autumn, having it be purple, but then also adding a little bit of blood on there so that when Corey was wearing it, it would still have this sort of like intimidating presence that we were hoping it would have. Fine balance, but yeah, I feel like when it ended up where it needed to be, it was pretty clear. Whereas a lot of other things, easy to be very subjective and be like, oh, maybe a bit more, a bit less, a bit left, a bit right. And that one was like, oh yeah, it's there finally.
Nice. And I'll let Adam come into this. We'll finish this topic off as well. Obviously, Swann Holloway is the final mask as well. I love Swann.
Yes.
There's two variations of it. People are kind of surprised by this. You have two different color palettes. What were the reasons behind doing two different color tones? Because they are quite very contrasting as well for her mask.
I mean, I'll answer as a player. I love when I'm playing a game and the choices I'm making are having an impact on what is happening, right? And I've seen people speculate about the different choices you need to get the different masks. And I think people have essentially figured out what you need, to make sure you get one or the other. But when the game first released, not just the mask, but so many different facets of the way that the story can play out, and then the little differences that happen, it was so exciting for me to see people see this. And, someone is sharing a GIF or a Let's Play, and then someone else watches and they're like, oh my God, that thing is different. And it's a little thing, you expect the big story beats to be different. It's like, what ending did you get? And, right away, I feel like everyone assumed it's a Don't Nod game. Of course, there are going to be different endings you can have. But then for these little things to change and people to realize, sometimes it takes a few days or a few weeks and someone's like, oh my God, that mask is different than my mask. How is this different? What did you do? Like that was very exciting for me, just, as a fan to have those things happen. And also, I work, of course, with the narrative team, but in terms of all of the different like levers and pulleys, the subtleties of what sort of like pushes you over the different thresholds to achieve different results. I couldn't tell you a walkthrough of like, here's exactly what you need to do in each of these scenes. I have like a vague sense of like, okay, if I want the game to unfold this way, roughly this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to get it. So I'm still occasionally surprised about little things that pop up that, I made the art and I was like, how do I get that specific thing? And then, sometimes I get a different one when I play it and I'm like, oh, cool. I actually had to do this. So yeah, from a player perspective, that is my answer. I think it's just really satisfying, especially with Swann, to have these kinds of things evolve and show up in unexpected ways. And then from an art perspective, again, it was a lot about talking with the narrative team in this regard, making sure that the choices that the player is making up to that point in the game, if you have behaved one way, you're going to get one result. And if you've behaved a different way, you're going to get a different result. And so it was talking, with Michel and Nina and trying to wrap my head around, sort of the different choices on each of those parallel paths and trying to find a color palette that would align. And then our character team, again, did a great job of bringing it all to life in the end.
Very nice. I will move into another topic afterwards, but Adam, please.
So I want to give Sam Bradley, middle name unknown Bradley. I want to give you.
By the way, not Sam.
Is it actually
Samuel William? But everyone calls me Sam. But yeah, Samuel William Bradley. That's the W in the middle is for William.
Well, then that is a proper British name. Then, so I guess I don't appreciate that. I need you. I'm going to give you an opportunity to geek out a little bit.
Oh, please.
So to set up, when I create, and you talk about emotions in art, and you are in control of the player's emotion essentially, right? Whether it be music or art, you set the tone for what the player sees, what the player hears. With music, I think the less the better. Like sometimes, like one scene might call for just a single note on a drop and then build into more notes. Like it's a slow, I think pauses in music really builds tension, right? There's minimalism in sometimes music, whereas a lot of musicians want more sound all the time. My question to you to geek out, right? I need you to explain this picture, and there's some subtleties in it. And what do you see in terms of minimalism? Like when you were designing this, like what kind of emotion did you want for this, and how did you minimize it?
Yeah, so this one is a special one. I guess if there's anyone only audio here, this is a painting that I made that was one of the early inspirations for the concert scene at the end of tape one. And for folks who've played this, it is like obviously a pretty big emotional beat in the game, right? A lot is revealed here. There's a lot of sort of teasing up to this point in the story, but this is where we have a really solid understanding of what's going on with Kat. And then it's also a culmination of the planning that the girls have been doing essentially all of tape one to, put on this concert. They've written their song and, they feel like they've figured out the perfect way to share this with the locals. And yeah, so they decided to set up shop in the parking lot of the Blue Spruce and have their show. And so for me, when I was thinking about this, when I made this painting, there were no visuals at all for that scene yet, so this is pre any cinematic planning, pre any of the stuff that ended up in the trailer for this sequence. It really was just narrative at this point. We knew that there was going to be a concert in the parking lot. I feel like even the character outfits weren't sorted out. Most of them kind of like in progress. So you can see some similarities, but the clothes that they're all wearing ended up changing dramatically because we hadn't figured out their outfits yet. Swann never ended up with this cut-off jean jacket, and Nora wears this dress except in a different scene and with a different color. Yeah, and really what I wanted to do with this one is there are a few different roles that concept art fulfills on a project, and I think the obvious one, and the one from an outside perspective, if you're not a concept artist, probably makes the most sense, is you imagine someone making a painting that is going to influence how a film or a movie or a video game or a comic book is going to look in the end, right? And that for sure is part of what is going on here. But another thing that I feel like is a little bit harder to appreciate when you only see the finished product. Our game comes out and then I put a bunch of images on social media. One thing that is sort of lost in there is that a really big role that a painting like this plays is it's an opportunity to have the team align and get excited about a moment in the game, right? So imagine we've got a bunch of people on our team, the team is quite large and some are visual people, but other people are not visual people. So we can say, okay, at the end of tape one, there's going to be a concert and it's going to be exciting and it's going to be emotional. And, the player is really going to have a lot of feelings when they're when they're playing the scene. And for some people that's going to make sense, and other people it's going to be harder to visualize. But all of a sudden, if we can pull up a painting and say, okay, actually this is how we're all going to feel, and people see this and they see the emotion on the characters, they see the intensity of the scene, it gets people stoked to like build this moment, right? All of a sudden it's not just like a blueprint about like, okay, these are the colors that we're going to have in the sky. We do use that, like if you look, there's this kind of like stormy green and blue sky that happens in that scene that was inspired by this painting. But for me, the much bigger benefit of an image like this was it really got us all really enthusiastic about building this thing together. And, so a bunch of things also changed from this. So, you can see the staging is different. They're all the girls are up on the truck. Nora's standing on her amp. The flag for the band is hanging off the back of the truck. You don't see the road in the background and the blue spruce off to the side. A lot of those details changed. But to me, that's sort of like besides the point, because the heart of the scene is there, right? And so this was a good opportunity, for us to all align on like, okay, this is the vibe. And so even though I wasn't there for the mocap, for example, or the cinematics team, a lot of the work that they were doing I was only seeing sort of tangentially. I know that they had seen this. Michel had shared it with them as part of the launch. There are a bunch of other factors, not just this one painting to set the mood and the tone and direct the sequence. There are going to be a lot of other factors that are going in as well. But this was one of the key materials we had for this sequence to really like get the ball rolling. And yeah, so for me, long answer short, the most important part of this was just let's get aligned on what the scene could be. Let's all get excited about it. Let's be ambitious and see what we can do with it. And yeah, this was my way to help kickstart that process.
Nice. Sam, just quickly as well, I'm curious because when you present something like this, because I found it fascinating when I listened to the other podcast when you talk about your history and art and what you were doing. I'm just curious as well because when you go and work for Michel, he is an art director as well, and I'm going to be as frank as well. Were you shitting yourself when you presented some of your art to him? Because like for me, when I saw him for the first time, I was like, oh my god! I was like, Michel's on the call, and it's like.
Yeah.
For me, just internally, I felt it, but I'm like, I'm not saying that he's going to say something, but does it make you feel like butterflies in your stomach when you present something like this to your entire crew of people? Because it's reflective of you and then also the other people that work with you, isn't it?
It still does today. This wasn't even just a thing that was like day one at Don't Nod. It was then, but it is now. And I think for me, actually, it's super important that I feel that way.
Mm,
If I'm showing my art to people and I'm not a little bit nervous, not a little bit anxious, it probably means that I'm not being vulnerable. And something that I appreciate more than almost anything else in art is a sense of earnestness and honestness. You know, people
mm,
like actually putting themselves out there. Kind of goes all the way back to question number one about style. I feel like
mm,
another thing that I've learned is that, like, while style is cool, it kind of is a veneer, and you can, to a degree,
Yeah.
hide behind that. You know, for
Yes.
yes.
me, what
100%.
is way, way, way more important is, yeah, a sense of like honesty and real feeling. And so for me to put art out in front of the team first of all, and then the world after that, it is scary,
Mm,
because even though this is, you know, work that is client work, you know, this is my
Mm,
job, and there is a specific mandate for all of this stuff. You know, there's I'm sure we'll talk more about this, a lot of collaboration that happens with Michel before I'm making this
mm,
art. Him and I work very closely on planning what this stuff will be, so it's not like it's just me showing up and saying, hey, we're going to have a concert. You know, there's obviously like a ton of pre-planning that comes before that sort of thing. I still feel like it is kind of incumbent on me, especially as someone in a leadership role, to, yeah, really put myself into the work. And I hope that it shows. You know, I hope that it connects with people. And I, you know, now that the game is out there and I see people, you know, I can watch a let's play of the end of tape one and see how people respond. I feel like in a way, me being vulnerable in that sense has paid off, because that scene definitely connects with people. You know, it's one of the things that is great actually about the internet, is I can watch people and get like a very candid response to how people are. It's different when I show it to, like, you know, one of my friends. Of course they're gonna be like, oh, this is so cool, you
mm,
made a video game. But I can, you know, go and watch a stranger and see them having a genuine emotional reaction to this thing that I've helped build. It does sort of reinforce the idea to me that if I can be a little bit vulnerable with my art, people are going to be able to, you know, open themselves up to it in a way, and have those feelings that I'm hoping they're going to. Yeah, and then just to talk more specifically about showing it to Michel, yeah, of course it was intimidating, especially when I first started to work with him, because like I said, I was a fan of his work, and you never know what it's going to be like when you start a new collaboration with
mm,
anyone. And I think the you know, I've had in the past good collaborations and bad collaborations, of course, like anyone in the creative industry. When you're being paid to be creative, you're going to connect better with some people
yeah.
than you will with others. And yeah, I've worked, you know, with a few other people where coming into the project, like with Michel, you know, I've been a fan of their work coming in to start, and it does add an extra layer of anxiety in there, because you don't know if they're going to be cool or not. You know, like I have
Mm,
thankfully had a number of great experiences with people who I really admire, and you know, they've been very generous, and it has been a really positive experience. But I have also had, you know, the opposite, where some of those collaborations haven't been the most pleasant thing in the world. And so, yeah, I was just unsure. Like I said, it was a very foreign idea, you know, French studio in a, you know, essentially a different world making this thing. And I'm only consuming the end result, which I love, but I have no idea what the people are like on the
yeah.
inside, you know? So at the
mm.
beginning, yeah, it was a little nerve wracking, but obviously, you know, I've been here for many years now, and we have like a great creative collaboration. So yeah, thankfully things have worked out so far anyhow.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
I was going to ask, what's a red flag for you when you're being hired by somebody?
I think it's sometimes hard to recognize people who are very ego driven, but I struggle to work with people like that. And, you know, I feel like there is a place for everyone in the creative world, but for me, when I'm collaborating with people, it's really hard to do, I think, for everyone. But one of the most important things about making something great is being willing to acknowledge what the
Yes.
best idea in the room is, you know? And there, I can think of so many times, not just on Bloom and Rage, but on many projects in my past, where good ideas have been presented and recognized, even if they weren't coming from, you know, the person in charge. So there are times where
Mm,
I, as the art director, will, you know, present ideas to the art team, and someone will come up with an idea that is better than what I had, and it is really my job to embrace that, you know. And
Mm.
it is a red flag to me when I can sense that someone isn't really interested in that kind of collaboration, you know? I don't know. I feel like other people probably can work fine in that sense, but for me, especially in a collaborative environment, I just want to make the best possible end product I can, no matter how we get there. And this is something that Michel and I are very aligned on. He is super receptive to ideas from all directions. He has obviously like very strong opinions and convictions about his intents, but there have been times when people have pitched him things and it is a great idea, and I can see him embrace that and get excited about it. And so when I saw that he was able to work that way, it was a relief for me, because it was dodging one of the red flags you're asking about, which is people who are unwilling to keep their eyes and ears open for great ideas from all directions.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm going to interject here as well, because I know, Sam, you said that as well about the ego stuff, and I will vouch for that because I heard Sam talk about it in the other podcast. 59-minute timestamp if you're curious about ego and
Yes.
managing that and kind of working on that.
Okay, all right.
But Sam, one thing I wanted to ask you was, and it kind of bounced off what Michel said as well, because this was Michel in speaking to Bonus Action in May, and he said it was brought by our art director, Sam Bradley. He loved the visuals, the lightings, the colours. It was great, and to give a small homage to this movie. And that was, I saw the TV glow. And when I went and watched, parts of it, I was like, I see a lot of this now, and I can see where a lot of the shades coming through. What was it about that made you want to do it from your perspective as well? And then what are some of the things that Lost Records fans should watch out for in terms of similarities they can draw between the two as like a homage?
Oh yeah, visually, I feel like you're saying, it's kind of all over the place, right? It's very easy even just to watch the trailer for that film and get a sense of how I could have been inspired. I feel like that movie came out, like we were well into production when I saw that movie. It was maybe like 6 months before the game was done, so it was. I don't know that there's anything in our game that I would say is like other than the license plate, of course, and there are a bunch of those. I don't know if there's like a specific scene where we decided to light it while looking at something from that game, but it was more so just like, I think whoever was making those choices on that project was drinking from the same well that we were drinking from, and it is nice to see that happening. I don't remember specifically where it was, but I heard someone was asking him about the similarities to Yellow Jackets at one point in an interview, and he was saying a similar thing where he wasn't watching that show, hadn't seen it at the time, but then after seeing it, it is sometimes maybe a little nerve-wracking, in the same way that when I watched that movie, I saw the TV glow, the colors, I'm like, oh my gosh, is it going to look like we're ripping these people off? But it really isn't. It's just like it's reassuring in a way, because we're taking our inspirations from similar but obviously different places, and other people whose work that I admire are featuring some of the things that we're excited to share in our project. So it gives me confidence that the people who respond well to that will respond well to what we're doing, So it's just like a good motivator and a good sign that, okay, we're headed in a direction that I think people are going to connect with. It works for us. It's nice to know that it's going to work for other people at some point, fingers crossed. Yeah. And then the other part about that movie is just even aside from the visuals, like there's a fictional TV show in that movie that is essentially Buffy the Vampire Slayer that plays a very large role in the narrative in that. And while we don't have like our equivalent of that in Lost Records, that was a huge reference point for us. I love that show. Nina, or Desiree, sorry, our writer, is a huge fan of that. Michel is a huge fan of Buffy. Luke is watching Buffy right now. It's like the team where, and it's just like, and you can see it in their previous works as well. From before I was at Don't Nod, they were obviously inspired by Buffy. It is like a cultural touchstone. That show's been referenced in so many different ways. But that was another thing about I Saw the TV Glow, is that they had this very, very direct homage to Buffy in there, and that was cool because we were all fans of it. And I was like, yes, here's another bit of overlap between this cool project and what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, very cool. Did you pick up on the ethereal dance then when you saw it for the first time in the scene? Because obviously Michel said that's a direct influence from Buffy, and when you watch the scene in Buffy, it shows. Did you pick up on that?
I think he actually told me that it was going to be inspired by that before I saw the visuals, right? Because we had talked a lot about that scene, because working on the masks and the way that it was going to play out, and also that scene, I knew that there was going to be a pretty strong lighting component, so I would be working with the lighting team to get that magic going, and then also the fire afterwards that comes, the following scene. So there was a lot of, even before we had done any of the cinematics or there were any visuals, him and I had talked through a lot of the choreography about the whole sequence, so that I could start to visualize what the VFX would need to be for that sequence. And with our VFX artist, who did a really phenomenal job for the dance scene specifically, and our lighting team, the music and the light is pulsing in sync, and the way that the camera cuts are happening. at the same time, yeah, the whole sequence turned out really great. So I had a sense that was going to come. It was spoiled for me that I knew that there was going to be this very clear Buffy homage in there, but I would have caught it anyhow because, yeah, like I said, I'm a huge Buffy fan.
Yeah.
No, very cool, very cool. And I'm going to keep the process on Michel as well, because obviously one of the things that we all get to enjoy is the key art with the feet dangling from the ledge.
Oh yeah.
We all love that,
Yes.
and then obviously it becomes the main menu screen as well, and it kind of evolved into that. Talk us through that process of making something like that, because it seems so simple, yet it feels so, I don't know, like butterflies. At least when I look at it every time, I feel like it's quite powerful. Just
Mm.
the representation of, you know, a summer in the 1990s, 1995. Walk us through that process of making something like that.
Yeah, so this one is really cool. This is one of my favorite paintings and then pieces of art that, you know, translated into the finished product in the whole
Mm.
game. And so we have this process at Don't Nod where when we're making concept art, there's kind of like different internal buckets and terms we use. And I don't want to get too inside baseball, but one of the terms we use is mood illustration. And this is essentially the same kind of thing you were showing before with the concert, where it isn't necessarily like, if you look at the mask art that I did, these are more traditional concepts
Mm.
where I'm drawing a thing that is sort of like a diagram for our character team to understand how to build an object in 3D,
Mhm.
right? Like clear visual intentions, but it's more sterile. Whereas our mood illustrations are really not so much meant to be something that we have to worry about translating one to one. It's really about capturing the feelings of a scene, right? So
Yeah.
this one was painted early on, and what we knew at the time was, I think this was either just before or just after I had switched into the art director role. So very early in the project, and Michel told me that we're going to be doing a music video sequence in a forest in Velvet Cove. And so he asked me to just pitch some ideas for different scenarios that could take place out there. And he
Mhm.
had explained some of the sequences to me. Like we knew that it was going to end beside the lake somehow. We knew that there was going to be moments along the road where they would stop and have specific interactions, like the scene around the dirt bike where they're sort of like pretending to be Corey and Dylan. We had all of these like loose ideas blocked out, but again, there weren't any visuals. And so I very
Mm.
quickly sketched a lot of rough ideas. I don't know, maybe like 20 different really quick scribbly ideas and showed them to
Yeah.
him. And that was one of the ones where it was like, oh yeah, this is a moment. We need to find a way to work this in. And so from there, we started working on the painting together back and forth. And at first it started out with, you know, maybe it was going to be a ledge over the forest. And then we realized it would be a really nice silhouette to frame the lake at the end. So we changed it to be something that was featuring the lake. And then the way it all came together for the title screen was we had actually had a different plan even from before I was on the project for what the main menu would be. And then I think it was Michel working with our designers, someone had the idea to have the title screen evolving in the same way that Life is Strange did, where the time of day would change, but they wanted to come up with
Mm.
something that was a little bit more representative of our characters. And at this point, the idea of like, oh, what if we could show the characters there or not based on what is happening in the story. And then I think the
Yeah.
feet thing was just like a natural evolution. It's like, oh, we know we're going to have this, you know, sort of like iconic scene to end the sequence with. What if that was our same title screen and then we could toggle it on and off? And so then from there, once that was decided, yeah, again, I got to work with the lighting and VFX team to set up all the different time of day scenarios and figure out who was going to be where. And yeah, then our designers coded all of the back end stuff needed to make sure that the right characters are there at the right time. Yeah, so that one was an unexpected but slow and steady evolution of just a random scribbled thumbnail based on an idea that turned into the main menu in the end. Which one of my favorite paintings that I made from the project, and so cool to see how everyone brought it to life.
And in that as well, did you have any involvement with Kat appearing as her Force Ghost apparition? Because obviously, I don't know who's mentioned it specifically on Twitter. I think they mentioned someone from Don't Nod Montreal said like this was like a last minute addition because we weren't thinking about doing it, but then we added it in. And obviously, it's like it's such a delight when the game finishes and you see Kat's like spirit ghost kind of like
Yeah.
on the ledge with the girls. Did you have any involvement in that, or was that any part of your like wheelhouse of getting involved in that?
I don't remember who the initial idea was, but the credit for that getting in there goes to Etienne, our VFX artist, because yeah, it was very last minute and he was really like, he was going super hard, and it was an idea that came up, and it might have been his, it might have been Michel's, it might have been someone else's. Honestly, I don't remember, but as soon as we all heard it, we were like, oh, this would be great. And I remember talking to him about it and I was like, man, you're overloaded already. Like you don't you don't need to do this. And he was like, but it's such a good idea. And then the next day he had mocked something up and it looked awesome. And we were all so excited. And it is beautiful. It's like such a nice touch. And yeah, I'm so glad it got in. So yeah, kudos to him for making it happen at the very last minute. Cause it was, yeah, sort of like we're crossing the finish line and this idea came in and it was like, is there time to get this in and make sure it's going to work and nothing's going to break? And yeah, I think it was him in concert with one of our game designers got it set up at the last second, and then he made it, brought in the visual component of it, and I was very, very excited because it looks so nice.
It does.
I have a follow-up question to that, where you said like, oh, you're really overloading yourself. Like how do you do that? I am also a fellow psychopath when it comes to art.
Yeah.
And we tend to like overload, like on the outside eye, we tend to overload ourselves, but I don't know really how to explain it to people. I'm like, I'm not trying to say that like I'm overloaded. I'm not trying to burn myself out. This is just what I just love to do. And I could do this for 14 hours in a day and still not be burnt out. But then I go over to the restaurant and where I work and I'm burnt out within 4 hours. I'm like, I don't want to do this. How do you explain it to people around you? Like, oh, you're really oversharing, or not oversharing, you're overloading yourself. But like, how do you explain to them? Like, no, I'm not. I just like doing this.
It is something that has been a challenge for me my whole life. I, like you, can really go hard when I'm enthusiastic about something. And I've had like a lot of different and conflicting opinions about it that have evolved over time. For a while I was just like, I'm just going to work however I want, whenever I want, and it is what it is. And then there was a period where I was trying to be much more strict about this because it was like really impacting my personal life, because I was not doing a good job of balancing my work and my life. And I feel like now I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I also had a period where I realized many years ago when I was working in television animation, I was, again, going real hard. And I realized that even if I was fine with doing that, I realized it was starting to reflect poorly on the people around me, because at the end of the week, when we all had to show what we had done, I would have like substantially more work to show all the time. But those other people, were just showing up for their 40-hour a week job and doing a great job. But when they had someone else who was just like, but I want more, it's got to be better, I can do more, sitting there next to them, it was setting unrealistic standards, So in that situation, I remember specifically toning it down. Whereas, now I feel like I do a better job of finding a balance. Thankfully, my partner is very understanding because she understands that my work is very important to me. But I've also tried to like build a structure in my life that gets me away from the workstation, because there are times when I want to be working, but I know that long term I will be better off by stepping back and taking a breather. So I've been better about finding ways to get out of my house, get out of our city, take breaks from the work while I'm at home. Actually, my dog was a really big one for this mushroom, that Sweet Angel. When we got her, it was during COVID. And I was just like, there was a period where this was, early COVID, before the video game stuff, where because I wasn't leaving the house, I was just working nonstop. The computer was there, everything was closed. I couldn't see my friends because it was locked down. So it was just like work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. And then, I realized that it was like taking a toll, not just like in terms of my mental health, but also my physical health, because I wasn't moving around. I was just like slowly melting into this chair. And then we got a dog and I was like active and walking and getting exercise and, like playing fetch at the dog park and all this stuff. And so, this was like I think like a good sort of light bulb moment for me, that I should be instituting other things in my life to encourage me to take breaks. And then, it comes back to the inspiration topic you were asking about earlier. So much of my inspiration comes from when I am away from my workstation. Like a lot of the inspiration for how the world and wildlife in Velvet Cove looks comes from me spending weekends at a cottage out in the country, walking and hiking in trails and being in nature, that sort of thing, taking a million pictures and getting excited about it, but not sitting here, just Googling and drawing and Googling and drawing. So that is where I'm at now, where I have like a sort of like tenuous but mostly healthy relationship with work. But there are times like at the end of the project, like I was saying, it got really busy and I was in it. I was like, just wanted to make sure that the game we shipped was the game we wanted to ship, and I wouldn't have any regrets about letting things slide at the last minute. So it just, I don't know, it's part of who I am. And I guess in a way, I'm thankful. I know plenty of people who the work that they do every day is like very, very hard for them to, struggle through. And for me, I'm fortunate to have work that I, enjoy for the most part. It is still work. It's hard, but it's work that I enjoy.
Dang.
No, and a healthy life balance is always important. I mean, Adam talk about it every
Yeah,
time because we have to juggle all kinds of things when we're doing podcasts
I
and
bet.
personal life. So it completely relates to us, and I'm glad that you have that as well because it is very important to have something like that. I'm just going to pull a question in for Kevin Kestis from Patreon because we know Sam Bradley's quite pesky with like his little things he's putting in the game. Even Michel's being asked in interviews, and he's like,
Yeah.
"I don't know about that." He's like, "I might have to ask Sam or someone on the art team." So Kevin asked here, he said, "Are there any hidden visual details or Easter egg players might miss unless they look closely?"
Oh yeah, there's so many. I feel like a lot of them have been found. I was shocked at how quickly there was a article listing all of the license plates like 3 days after the game had come out or something like that. And yeah, but there are ones in there that, I mean, to my knowledge, people haven't noticed. I have seen people comment on various pets that they have noticed in the game, and some of those have been identified as team members' pets. And I will say for sure that there are pets in the game that, to my knowledge, have never been acknowledged. And even people on our team don't realize where their pet is in the game. So
Oh wow.
yes, this was another last minute squeeze it in there effort with me and one of our environment artists, Carol Ann. I sent her a couple of paintings at the very last second of different people's pets, and I was like, we got to hide these in there, and one day they will discover them, or someone will find them and show them on social media. So there are a couple I will not reveal here because I am excited for someone one day to get a DM a year from now and say, hey, is this your cat? Why is there a picture of your cat in this random place in the game? And so, yes, there are a few hidden in there that, yeah, as far as I know, have not been discovered. I'm trying to think if there's any other. Oh, well, the one I will say, because I know a million people have seen it, but one I've had context for is one of the pets. When you first enter the Blue Spruce, there's a corkboard with a bunch of different interactable objects you can pick up and look at up close. But there's a missing cat flyer on that corkboard that isn't interactable. There's no in-universe narrative for that. But the cat in that it belongs to one of our texture artists who worked on the project, Elmi, because we were on a group call where we were doing a review, and she had a service person in her apartment, and her cat escaped. So her cat actually went missing, and for 8 hours she was super panicked, and it turned out that for 8 hours her cat was just hidden under a pile of clothes in her closet, as cats are wont to do. But it was a panic because we were all on call, and she was like running around being like, oh my god, the repairman let my cat out, and she was freaking out, and we were all like, oh my god, your cat, because we all see each other's pets in our meetings all the time, right? They're like popping up in front of the camera. And so that, I think, maybe actually was the one that started the cat portraits, actually. And so yeah, the one in the Blue Spruce, when you first walk in the door, that is Elmi's cat, and it is because Tokyo, I think is his name, he escaped, or at least we thought he escaped on call live, and we were all panicked. And then yeah, Estelle, one of our concept artists, she made that beautiful illustration of the cat, and we stuck it up on the corkboard in memory of that one very stressful meeting that we had.
So are you
Dang.
telling us that Pippin and Bao are in the game?
Hey, you hunt around and you may or may not. I will not confirm nor deny, but potentially, if you dig around, something might show up.
Oh
Okay.
damn! There we go. There's some some really
There's
nice Easter eggs in there. The entire development team is just going to be like looking for their cat now, or
Oh yeah,
variation of pets. Like we need to look for them. No, that is
yeah.
very cool, Sam.
As far as I know, there's only 2 or 3, and yes, as far as I know, also only me and one other artist know where they are because we were the two that orchestrated it. So they're tucked away.
Wow. Dang. Okay.
Well, I saw Michel's interview where he talked about the bottles as well, and he's like, is that a reference to Life is Strange 1? Is that a Life is Strange reference? He's like, I'm gonna have to go and check with Sam, and it's like, I was like, no, that is not that.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see that you guys got that involvement. And one of the things I think is fascinating, me and Adam love this as well because Adam's got his new ink and his new tattoo as well. Um,
Yeah.
Swann Holloway's tattoo is like amazing.
Oh,
That entire design on her arm, the adult Swann Holloway. Walk me through making something like that because I think this is where
Oh my gosh.
Juliet and the other team get involved as well. But how is it to do that? Because the dragon looks amazing. Is that Studio Ghibli inspired by any chance?
I think, when we were talking about my inspiration, Studio Ghibli is a huge influence for me in general. So I wasn't looking at Spirited Away while I was drawing that, but I feel like all of my art has a little bit of Ghibli in there. Yeah, having worked in animation for a long time, Princess Mononoke is maybe my favorite movie of all time. Ghibli is very much
Yeah.
in my DNA. But yeah, it's good that you mentioned Juliet for the tattoo because she had a huge hand in this one. I think this is maybe the hardest execution wise anyways, task that I had on the project. There are other ones that maybe ideas were more challenging to wrap my head around, or I spent more time on, but just in terms of like making the finished art, there the tattoo that you see on Swann, well, there are like variations of it again based on player choice, but there was an entirely different tattoo that was done, and Juliet put it on Swann's arm, and her and I were like, it's not good enough, is it? And we were like, nope, it's not good enough. And I spent many hours drawing the previous one, and at the time I was like confident. I was like, oh, this is going to work. We had a lot of back and forth with it. Michel had a bunch of ideas, Juliet had a bunch of ideas, I drew them. We thought it was going to work, and it didn't. And so we were like, okay, how do we salvage this? And this wasn't quite as last minute as the ghost cat feet, but not much before that. It was like, basically it was one of these things where it was like, okay, we can try one more time, but if it doesn't work the next time, we're shipping no matter what. There's like no more opportunity to fix this. Yeah. And so what we did, the way that it worked the first time was there was like a narrative idea, because like as you look at that tattoo, you realize it's really influenced by a lot of what happens in the story, right? And the idea is Swann has lost her memory, but in some part of her subconscious, the events of that fateful summer are still in there somewhere. And so she went to get a tattoo, and whether she realized it or not, those things that happened influenced the art that ended up on her arm. So we had sort of a more explicit version of what those ideas were that, had been lost in her brain, and translated it to the art. And yeah, the first round didn't work. So round two, what we ended up doing was I gave those pieces to Juliet, and I said, okay, hey, we still want to keep these ideas. But the reason it didn't work out the first time, honestly, is just that getting a sleeve tattoo is a lot different than getting a single tattoo, where it really needs to work with the anatomy of the body, right? And so since Juliet is a 3D artist, she took all of the sort of disparate pieces that on their own were interesting but didn't work as a sleeve, and sort of like rearranged them to be properly aligned on Swann's arm. And then from there, sort of took that and like turned it back into 2D for me to then re-illustrate and then re-put back on. So yeah, there was this whole process where it was like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But in the end, again, this is one of those ones where it was like, didn't have to happen, but I'm so glad we did, because I love the end result. And it's crazy. I've seen, I think 5 now actual people get that tattoo, which is just mind-blowing to me. There was like young Sam in art school at one point was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be a tattoo artist? And clearly I've never pursued that, but now in a way I kind of have, right? Because I gave Swann a tattoo, and now a bunch of people have that tattoo on them, right? It's so cool. Yeah. And I mean, what better way to be confident that it's resonating with the fans than if they're seeing it and loving it, and then so much so that they're getting it tattooed on them. I feel like that's a testament to the whole game, really. I mean, clearly they're liking the art of that tattoo, but it's so cool that people have connected so much with the game that they would want to like permanently make that their arm because they liked Bloom and Rage to that degree. Like what a compliment. I don't think for me as an artist, I don't know that there is a better compliment. Honestly, it's like the coolest thing.
Get it placed, yeah. Yeah, because it's interesting that you say that, like thinking about tattoos just specifically on the body. Like I remember when we were, by the way, just showing this off now because we didn't show it off on thing. But like I was talking with the artist about the placement of the tattoo just on the forearm here. And he was just talking me through it, like how you center it on the body, that the center of the design needs to be on a specific part of the body so that when you turn it, it can be just visible in all directions. And it's just something I never really think about. Like, oh yeah, just get a tattoo. But I specifically asked him, like, what is your opinion about the placement? What about the size? How should it look? And yeah, it's really interesting to talk about, like when you're actually in the session, and like it needs to work with your anatomy. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what Juliet was doing with her character. And she also has a bunch of cool tattoos. So she was the perfect person to like make sure that it was going to look awesome. Yeah, could not have had a better collaborator for that task for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you chose the great Miyazaki film as well, which is Princess Mononoke over Spirited Away every single time for me. Very good shout. But I'm just curious as well with the tattoo as well. Was there any specific part that you liked to draw? Was it the dragon, or was it any other specific part that you thought, actually, that's a really cool touch that I've added to it?
Oh, I think actually my favorite isn't even the sleeve. It's the tattoo that Swann has on her other arm with the flower and the little picture of what appears to be Kat and the nosebleed. I love this one. And again, I've seen a couple people with this tattoo, which is just so cool. But yeah, for this one, it took quite a while actually. So a lot of the almost all of the foliage in that we're seeing around Velvet Cove is pretty accurate to Michigan. You know, we did our best to check this stuff and make sure, you know, that it was as regionally accurate as we could. But obviously the flowers that grow around the abyss, they're magical. You know, they light up at night. These are just totally fantastical. And so there was a period long before the tattoo where I pitched a whole bunch of different magic flower ideas, and eventually we settled on this one. Again, there was a lot of back and forth about like what was going to be the right size and shape, because we knew that there was going to be some interactions with it. It was going to be a thing that would need to light scenes, but also, you know, Swann picks one. There's a whole bunch of different factors that go into that. And so by the end, I was like very happy with where we ended up with those. And again, the environment team did a really great job of, you know, making nice models. We see it in the box at the end. You know, it's just like a recurring theme throughout the game. And so by the time we were ready to design the tattoo, that asset was like long since finished and everyone was super happy about it. And then to be able to tie it into the visuals of the tattoo and then Kat and having all that sort of connect together. Yeah. So for Swann's tattoo anyways, I think that was my favorite bit.
Yeah, and it was really cool as well. I think Swann's really good design because I think you guys worked with the other teams as well, and I think Swann's outfit looks amazing as well because you know you have the bird skull and the moth brooch. I think you got an actual physical version from someone. I don't know.
That I can show you. Look at that. Hold on, I got it sitting right
That's
beside me right
wild,
here.
dude.
Yeah, this was such a nice gift from Carol Ann, one of our environment artists. She for the environment team 3D
That's cool.
printed everyone's like favorite things that they made. So there are other ones like this that the team I'm assuming they just haven't shared them on social media, but there's I think like 5 or 6 different little keepsakes that got all made. But yeah, I ended up with Swann's moth brooch, which I'm like really into skulls. So this is like a very cool one for me to have
Did
and
you,
get to keep.
as an art director as well, and you're making this game as well, because obviously it's a big homage to the 90s, and every time I see the moth and stuff related to Swann, I always think Silence of the Lambs. Did you start seeing, like, again, those, like, parallels that you could draw with the 90s influences? Not something that you're, like, directly copying or influencing, but did you start seeing that, oh, actually, that kind of reminds me of Silence of the Lambs, or this reminds me of something along those lines?
Yeah, we did talk about this because there, like, if you look inside Nora's garage and the movie palace, some of the posters that are hanging up are just our own fictional things, but others are obvious homages to real
Mm,
movies, right? And so when we were going through different, you know, what are the iconic images that we all remember from going into Blockbuster in the 90s, what sticks in your head? The Silence of the Lamb imagery is, you know, it's like one of the all-timers, right? It's like so easy to remember,
right.
and yeah, such a beautiful iconic design. So yeah, we did talk about it at one point. I don't know if it was ever specifically in concert, what in the sense that like should Swann have a moth because of Silence of the Lambs, but I think it was one of those things where we noticed very early on and we were like, oh, this is cool because it is just part of the aesthetic of the time, right? Like I think
Mm,
had that Silence of the Lambs imagery never existed, Swann essentially would have all of the things that she has now in terms of the visual
yeah.
iconography. But I feel like it was like a great way to like lean into the era because yeah, that image is it's an iconic one.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, absolutely, and especially with the 90s, it really hits home with that, and,
Yeah.
one thing I want to ask you as well, because obviously Swann's tattoo is very much a tattoo in the way that you guys drew it as well, but Kat's tattoo is not a tattoo as you see in the Bloom and Rage concert, it's a lot of
Mm.
drawings, a lot of customization. What was the thought process of doing that? Because obviously people are digging that those, like, drawing tattoo style designs, what was it like making the process on that?
Yeah, so this one was a lot more freeform than Swann's because, like you're saying, it's a lot more sort of like piecemeal. And this one was kind of the exact opposite of Swann's because I had been struggling with Swann's. And so I was nervous that Kat's was going to be really difficult. And it ended up not at all. Like, I really just sort of like zoned out and got to doodle a bunch. We had a very vague idea of what it could be, but I feel like I kind of just did my best to get in Kat's headspace for that scene and made a bunch of little doodles all separate from one another. And then if you look at the concept that I shared for that, you can see that I blocked it out on her arm. But the one thing that was really different than Swann's is Swann's was like designed as a traditional sleeve where all of the pieces essentially interlock, right? So it is kind of like you can't
Yeah.
move things around really. It is one piece of art that starts on her finger and ends on her shoulder and all has to like align perfectly with her anatomy. Whereas Kat's, it's a bunch of different loose little pieces. So I drew all of those and
Mhm.
then worked with our character artist Ricardo, and I told him, okay, here are the 4 or 5 like anchors. If you can match these to where they are in the concept, all of the other ones, you know, you can nudge or scale or move them as much as you need to, and just focus on making it look great on her arm after you get the sort
Yeah.
of like key pieces in place. And so, yeah, I think I even gave him some extras just in case there was some like weird negative space or empty areas, you know, he could add some other stuff in. And then we put it on Kat, and she looked great. And I was like, oh, what a relief, because the other one was such a challenge. And that one, yeah, for whatever reason was, yeah, it just all came together in a very seamless and painless way, which I was very relieved to have happen.
Well, that's always a reassuring way of going with it. And I think that might actually bleed into this question, which is from Kevin Lackner from Patreon. It's
Mm.
quite there. What is the most creatively fulfilling moment in Lost Records for you?
Oh,
Oh, wow. The most creatively fulfilling moment. I think for me, I don't know if this is the answer that Kevin is looking for, but it really is the conversation that we, as the creators of this thing, get to have with the fans. You know, I mean, like in a literal sense, what we're doing right now, but also in the sense that there's just clearly a really passionate group of people out there who have connected with this on such a deep level. You know, the tattoos were a good example, but, you know, like seeing all the fan art, all the cosplays, all of this stuff, I can tell that this game really means a lot to a lot of people. And when I was working on it, I felt like it had the potential to be a really special thing. But when you're in the middle of a project, you really have no idea how it's going to come together at the end, because really there are so many things that need to just click at the 11th hour in any collaborative creative process. You know, it just is what it is. And then with video games especially, there's just so many moving pieces, right? Like so many different people with really like distinct and unique specialized skill sets all have to sort of come together and have everything all aligned to deliver an experience that a player is going to connect with in the end. And when you're in the middle of it, you can see a lot of people doing really great work. But
Mm.
also, when you step back, you realize that the people who play the game, you know, or I should say 99% of the people who play the game aren't really going to care about that stuff. What they're going to care
Yeah.
about is the experience they have when they have a controller in their hand and they're sitting down in front of their TV after a long day at work and they want to experience something. Do they get that or not? You know, and it's like, if they get it, then sure, it's cool to like Google the artists or the musicians and, you know, put the soundtrack on your iPod, but you're not doing that if the game doesn't hit, right? And
mm,
seeing people respond to it, I know that for the people we were hoping it was going to connect to, they have connected with it, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, I feel like that is creatively the most satisfying thing, because you can imagine where it's going to go, you can have plans for where it's going to go. In many cases, there are going to be plans that change along the way. You know, there are like many different constraints you have to work around. You talked about some of this with Luke and Michel on your call. But in the end, you know, there's no way to guarantee what comes out is going to be what you imagine it. And there's no way to guarantee
Mhm.
that people are going to connect the way that you hope that they will. But for me, yeah, for sure, the most creatively satisfying thing is that for sure some of those things have landed in the way
mm,
that I hope they would for players. And they're having the feelings that I hope they would when they're engaging with the art that we made together.
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah.
And Michel said as well, like it's always like, you know, it's just a crazy to even think a game gets released. You know, it's just hard to get like games out there. Like the work that
Yeah.
you guys do behind the
It's
scenes is just like never seen like anything can happen in between. It can't. It scales and productions change, and it's just like you have to kind of like constantly adapt to your situation, don't you?
Yeah, it's wild that any game gets released. You know, it's like I feel like everyone you talk to who works in game dev, they're like, you'll never believe this crazy story, but every project is just crazy stories. It is what it is, and everyone does a good job of like, you know, putting on a good front after things are done. You kind of have to be professional about it, but the reality is like if you could peek behind the curtain. Honestly, at any dev studio, it's just like, you know, everything's on fire, chickens running around with no heads. It's just
Yeah.
craziness until the
Yeah.
last minute when you know, everyone is really trying to rally and make sure that things come together the way we hoped. And yeah, the only way I can really be objective about it is to look at how other people are responding to it, you know, because you get so deep into it. I worked on this game for like 4 years. It's next to impossible for me
Yeah.
to be objective about it. Maybe I'll come back in 5 years, 10 years and play it and I'll be
Mm.
able to really see it through, you know, a distant pair of eyes. But yeah, it's still so fresh to me that like I see so much of what is behind the curtain, so much of the guts of the project when I'm looking at it, that it's very hard to look at it, you know, just as a player and as a fan. So to see other people
Mm.
approach it that way and respond to it in the way I hope they would is really satisfying.
Dang.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to take away from Lost Records, because there's like one other topic I want to talk about Lost Records, but I want to move it away from it because your
Yeah.
personal life is full of a lot of things. You like traveling, but one of the things that you love doing is baking. And Adam has thrown slander on this
Yes.
podcast before about bakers. He's like, they're not chefs. He's like, they're just bakers.
They're not. They're
Pastry.
straight up not.
He does this
They're
kind of thing.
scientists more than chefs. Yes.
I kind of wanted to let you address the situation with Adam's slander around bakers and like, you know, your appreciation for bakers. Because like even one of our Patreon users, Kevin Lackner, he loves making, I think it's banana bread, and he loves like
Of
making
course,
baking stuff.
Kevin.
Even
Of course,
and this is what I get. This is what I get for reaction, Sam. So I kind of wanted to let you address Adam and be like, put him in his place as he is for a chef.
Well, I do have a cookie recipe, Adam, that potentially could change your mind. So if ever we are in a vicinity of one another, I will give you one of my custom marshmallow cornflake chocolate chip cookies, and we will see how you feel about this opinion after you have tried one. But to answer the question, part of the reason why I love it is I just feel like it's great for me to have hobbies that are really unrelated to art. And it kind of goes back to that work-life balance thing. This was a thing that I actively chose to pursue because I like sweets, you know, I like to bake goods, and I realized at a point in my life, I just finished directing an animated film. My life was upside down. I was super, super burned out. I needed to reset. And what I needed to do was not just go back to spending all day, every day making art. I didn't want to leave that behind, but I just needed an outlet that was somewhat creative. And I will concede, Adam, you're right that it isn't all that creative. It is more of a science than an art. The more I deviate from recipes, the worse things turn out. There is not a lot of room for improvisation or creativity, but it is still very, very satisfying for me to make some delicious treats to share with my pals or overindulge in. I was making cookies last week for my girlfriend and her mom, and they were stoked. And it is nice to be able to do that. It's just like, an opportunity for me to get my hands dirty a little bit, get away from the computer, and have something very tangible and satisfying at the end without too much work. Relatively, it's easier to make a batch of cookies than a video game. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, I can imagine. To set this record straight, my wife is a baker. So
oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah,
you're spoiled then. Oh my gosh. If I lived with a baker, it would be a disaster.
It's awful, dude. Yeah, like I've lost 100 pounds. I kept off 100 pounds for 10 years, and it's just when I live with a baker, it's harder and harder.
I bet.
But I will say, like I agree with you that sometimes you need to step away from the overstimulation of art. For me, it's reading. Like I just like to read because it's not stimulating. I can just focus on a book or even just an audio book and just like listen to a story.
You read anything good recently? You have any recommendations for me?
So I did say on the podcast that I was going to read through House of Leaves. And
okay. Footnote, I was the one who put the House of Leaves license plate in the game, by the way, because I'm a big fan of that book. So very excited that you're considering reading that. Have you started?
So I'm going to start next spooky season because, and I'll say this on the podcast, I did make this promise. So I live right now, when we moved here, we didn't know the area that we were moving to. I live directly next to a frat house. And then on the other side, there's some fraternity apartments. And then right across the street from us is, you guessed it, another fraternity. So I am surrounded by frat kids. So to be so concentrated that you need to have on House of Leaves, I'm like, let's wait for the next place. We're not signing another lease here. Like when this lease is up. But I am starting The Ring, the actual book, The Ring, based on.
Oh wow,
the movie was based off of. Yeah,
no way.
So
I've never read this.
Yeah, it's different. I'll say that. So I will say that on the podcast that next spread the arts. Once I finish it, it's so far very good, and I would like to read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch.
Oh, I've read this and it was great.
Yeah, dude, I've heard great things because I love Wayward
real
Pines.
page turner.
Yeah. Every one of his books, I think, are like page turners, But like I said, I think once I'm in a quieter area and I can concentrate more on the chaos that is House of Leaves, like I can do that. But living next to a frat, surrounded by frats, not the place for concentration and understimulating yourself. But no, getting back to it, like baking, I think, I think baking really does relate to more of like painted art because there is a lot of more there's standby moments, there's things of thinking, there are times of patience, But music and cooking, there's a lot of chaos involved. There's just like more of like let's see if this works. Let's see if this drum works. Let's see if this guitars come in. Like same thing with cooking. It's like, I don't know, just see what works, see what happens, just go nuts. Not trying to say that like that is the stigmatism, but I think that it relates to both. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Do you not find that you might be like bleeding into art a little bit by baking, because then you get like the icing and you put it on something and you start like you start drawing on the cookie?
I try my best, but it's hard not to do that sort of thing. Yes, every now and then if I get to like decorate with the icing or something like that, it's impossible not to restrain myself. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like really my favorite thing in terms of that, I think, is doing the lattice on pies. I love getting a beautiful lattice. Like, I mean, it's good when it tastes good, but it's even better when the lattice looks perfect. So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to keep this as a hobby that is away from art, but everything, I guess, pulls me back in a tiny bit.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. When I try and make a hobby, I'm like, oh, maybe I should start a podcast on it. I'm like, no, you've already got 2 podcasts. Like, just like reel that in. It's not a good idea for that. But Sam, I'll bring it back onto Lost Records for a moment, because obviously I think one of the overlooked aspects for us, at least, is very early on we saw that really beautiful scene with the 4 girls walking on the log, and you played a key part in the development of that. I think even Etienne said it to you on Blue Sky that he didn't realize that you'd done the original concept art for it and done the design. Walk us through making something like that, because again, I might be making too much of a projection here, but it kind of reminds me very much of those vibes of Chloe Price and Max Caulfield walking on the train tracks, for example. It's like a really like iconic moment within Life is Strange. It feels very seminal within Lost Records in terms of, the girls exploring the forest, and something that's just kind of like, just a little bit chilled in its tone. What was it like making that and then actually finally seeing it get into the final product as well?
I think I can't remember if we talked about the Max and Chloe on the tracks scene when I was working on that, but I know for sure that when I was drawing that, I was thinking a lot about Stand By Me. And I would be shocked if Michel or Edouard weren't looking at Stand By Me when they were planning out those train track scenes, right? Because you think about it and like there's very obvious parallels to what is going on in Stand By Me with both what I did with the log and what they did with the train track. And maybe we did talk about the Max and Chloe thing on the tracks at some point. Like I genuinely don't remember one way or the other, but yeah, I remember very distinctly thinking a lot about Stand By Me when I was making that image. And that was another one that really just became like an iconic moment from a sketch. It was part of that whole, we're going to have a music video in the forest, pitch some ideas. So similar to the one with the feet, I had a very, very quick sketch of a log and the 4 girls going across it. And I've seen something that's really cool is I've seen fan art of that scene based on my painting, so it's like 2 steps removed but still is the scene from the game, which is like such a cool thing. And then while Michel worked much more closely with the cinematics team than I did, this is one where I was chatting with them a little bit because I was hoping we could really try and keep the sort of like iconic front-on silhouettes of the girls moving across the log, and they were totally open to that. They really liked the painting, so we had some back and forth to make sure that the framing of the shots was working really well. And we even because of that painting, changed a little bit of the level design for that part of the game, so that before you cross the log and all 4 girls are on there, you can film with Swann's camcorder to trigger the log crossing, but there's a little area, it's kind of, you go down the hill and around the corner a little bit, and you can point the camcorder up at the girls while they're on the log. And I don't think that part of the level design wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the painting. So it was cool to see that come to life. And I feel like that was another painting where people were just excited about the potential of what that moment could be. So thankfully, people were enthusiastic about trying to capture the essence of what was going on in the painting. And if you look at the final scene versus the painting, we ended up changing the time of day, and the scale is a little bit different. And I think the order of the girls is maybe swapped, but the feeling of it, the mood of it is all still there, right? So it's really cool to see the genesis of that idea all the way through to the finished shipping product.
Dang.
Yeah, and it is very cool to see how it plays. Like, it just feels quite the colors match the environment, and it makes it very like, I think, like, very 90s aesthetic, summery, and then the way it looks as well. And it's kind of bleeding into this question as well. It's from Kevin Kestis, and I kind of wanted to talk to it because we've been talking about all the positives, but this kind of adds into what he says here, which is the town of Velvet Cove feels like a character in itself, especially with the abyss. What's its design? What inspired its design?
Well, in a literal sense, we looked a lot at the Upper Peninsula. Like, we wanted it to feel authentic, so there was a fair bit of research in terms of what that would be. But another thing that we always had to like keep in mind was the fact that everything happening in Velvet Cove was essentially a memory, right? So there was a fine line to walk where we really didn't want to have something that was like perfectly realized in the sense that it was a 100% believable town that could be, translated one to one and exist in a real space. One like credit to whoever this was. I saw somebody posting online about they had sort of triangulated how the water tower that we see didn't make sense because it was always facing different directions when we were seeing it, and it meant that Swann's house would be on top of the movie palace. And like in a way, like it's super impressed that someone noticed, and they were actually like in a literal sense they were right, but also that wasn't a mistake on our part. Like we were trying to think about the idea that like, oh, if you were going to a movie store, you're going to your local like small town equivalent of a Blockbuster to rent a movie every Friday night with your folks, and you could see the water tower, and then you went home and you could see it out your window. Probably you would remember it looking a specific way. You wouldn't remember like the exact angle. It would just be like, oh, the deer antlers. You would remember in your head the deer antlers, So we had planned these things out to feel more like a memory of a town in small ways. And another thing we talked a lot about was just the idea of liminal spaces, so we don't have like roads connecting Swann's house to the Blue Spruce to the movie palace intentionally. We could have had a more concrete layout where everything was one to one. And I do have a map internally to make sure that the general geography aligns, but yeah, there were these allowances that we gave ourselves because we wanted the scenes to feel more like a memory of a specific place as opposed to like a GTA style map, completely regardless of like production constraints. Obviously we wouldn't have had the like resources to build out an entire town. It's just a different type of game at that point. But even if we had, I don't think I would have wanted to. I like these little pockets that we built that feel kind of, the scene at the where they're at the playground at night trying to find the keys. It just feels like a memory of a playground as opposed to like, okay, the playground is a block and a half from Swann's house, and here's the sidewalk that you have to bike down to get there. And it's just like, no, you kind of have this like fuzzy edges. We even put a lot of fog around that scene, around the edges, and I like that it kind of gets a little bit dreamlike when you're in that space. It's like, what is across the train tracks? I don't know. That's kind of where I remember the water tower, but is the lake over there? I'm not sure, and it just kind of, it becomes a little bit fuzzy in your brain. And that's the feeling we were going for, as opposed to the literal, like, here are the 6 blocks that define what Velvet Cove is.
Nice. So Sam, it was really interesting to hear your perspective on that part. And there's one thing that really stood out for me, and it was about deers. And I kind of want to bleed into a question that Kevin asked here as well. So Kevin Lackner asked, and this is KJ, I'll keep forgetting that there's 2 Kevins here. Kevin Lackner asked here as well, said, what role does symbolism... He's got slander against the Kevins, but anyway, what role does symbolism or visual metaphor play in your art direction?
I think it's a big part of it for me, in the way that I was trying to describe before, where I really like the idea that people can take some ownership over their experience of a thing after they have consumed it or while they're consuming it, right? So I feel like visual metaphor is one of the best ways to do this, because oftentimes there is going to be some explicit purpose for a thing. But if you're layering it in a way that isn't too in your face, it sort of allows people to decide how they want to engage with that, like, and since we were just talking about Velvet Cove and the water tower, the antlers, they're a great example of this. They came from a conversation between myself and Estelle, one of our concept artists, and Michel. We were in a concept meeting one day. We knew that we were going to have some iconic silhouettes that would represent the town. And I remember the 3 of us talking through and coming up with a bunch of different ideas, and the antler idea got settled on. And, there are so many different ways for a player to experience that and decide what that means in the larger context of the game, right? There is the way to interpret it in a literal sense where, you see the antlers, and then also, there's a deer farm later on. So maybe it is just the thing that this town is a town that is, known for its deer farms, and that's why it's there. But then also, you see the photograph of Swann where she's doing the peace sign, and, she's got seemingly the antlers coming out from behind her head. This was illustrated by one of our concept artists, Juliana, and she knocked it out of the park. It's so cool. And I've seen fan art of this exact same composition. And I think the fact that people are connecting with it in that way, it means something more than just there are some antlers because in this town there are deer, right? But what that is and what it means, like if you imagine Swann posing this way, what is Swann thinking when she's taking that picture? And then when someone is, as a fan, seeing that and connecting with it enough that they want to re-illustrate that moment, I don't think it is to that person just the idea of there's some antlers in the center of town. There's something more there, right? And it is a very clear visual metaphor, but what that idea is evoking to each of those different people, the person who it is just some architecture, the person who is Swann, our fictional character, and then the person who is, interpreting through Swann what that means. It's a whole bunch of different layers of what it could or should mean. And I love the fact that people can sort of unravel why it is there and what they think about it. And it's one of the, unanswered questions of the game that I like is, unanswered, because it allows people to fill in the blanks for themselves.
Absolutely. Did you pet Gertie when you played your game?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right,
that's the only answer. Yeah.
We were about to boot you off the call if you said no, because like that, what kind of monster are you? Like not to pet the deer. But absolutely, all very cool, Sam. And I kind of wanted to ask you as well, because when you were talking about the water tower and people like when you triangulate things and it's in different places. Are you a Twin Peaks fan? Because obviously, the Don't Nod team is heavily inspired by Twin Peaks, and like, if you look at Michel's catalog, like X-Files and Buffy and stuff like that, it's quite like I feel like you kind of need to know the material and stuff like what he works with. But were you a Twin Peaks fan?
Yeah, I think what has allowed Michel and I to collaborate pretty well together is we just do have a lot of the same influences. It was really easy to come on and understand what he was referencing, which makes my life much easier. It's obviously a lot harder if either the source material or the reference material is totally out of my wheelhouse. And I have had collaborations like that before, and you find a way to make it work. But this one, for sure. I think Michel is definitely a bigger David Lynch fan than I am. Like it's one of, as he was saying on his chat with you guys, it's like an all-timer for him. And I like Lynch, but for Michel, it's like a huge influence. But I am familiar with it. I really like Twin Peaks. I still haven't watched the newest season though, which is why I say I'm clearly not as big a fan as Michel. I'm behind the one that came out, like the Return or the Revival or whatever, the one from like 10 years ago. My partner had never seen any of it. And so recently, probably about a year ago, I rewatched season 1 with her. And so probably this winter things get a little bit slower for us in life, and we'll probably do season 2, and then I'm excited to go on because I haven't seen season 3 yet, and I've heard good things about it, and I've seen a few random out of context clips, and I'm like, whoa, what is going on in this show? So I'm looking forward to the finale.
And even Ruth Radley's in the Return as well, as I spoke to her yesterday about as well, which is quite cool. So I've got 4 questions. I'm going to take 2 from Patreon, 2 for myself. Adam, do you want to throw anything in?
Man, I had a question for a story that wasn't too long. I mean, I will ask one thing about like interpretation and metaphors. Have you ever made something that you had just like no metaphor for? You were just, you just made it, and then somebody came up to you like, I totally got what you were saying about that. And you're just like, sure. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah, definitely. It happens for sure. I feel like, again, I don't want to even cite examples because I wouldn't want to diminish someone's experience, but I've seen it happen on Lost Records. Like I've seen things that I specifically chose to put in the game just because I needed something, and kind of the way I was describing Kat's tattoo, where there are times where I just need to like sit down and draw and make content to make sure that the world feels lived in and believable. And so I'll come up with a bunch of different, to me, very random ideas that are just like, okay, we're building a scene, and then there will be one little element to me that is like genuinely it's an afterthought, but it's there, and it is part of the pastiche of this textured blanket we're making that is a world. But someone gravitates towards it and they're like, oh my god, I see what Don't Nod is doing, I understand the reference they're making there, I can't believe it, I'm so excited, or I can't believe it implied this thing. And I'm like, awesome that you have had this experience. That is so cool. And I've had it happen with my personal art as well, and it's I don't know, I think it's just like a really interesting little opportunity to understand how people's brains work differently. Something that might exactly. Yeah. You see things from a different angle. Something that might completely disappear to one person is like a very big focal point for another. Oftentimes it's surprising to me what people land on, and vice versa. Other things I'm like, oh, someone is for sure going to get hung up on this. And then no one notices.
No, that's the thing about like, there's I can't remember which song it was, but I had like a music theory friend of mine, like, oh, it's crazy how you came into the one scale and then you resolved it with a completely different scale. I was like, Yes.
Yeah.
I am Beethoven. Yes, I did that intentionally. So it's funny though, like you hear people's perspective, and you just think about your own mind of just like, oh wow, I didn't even see that. So like
Yeah,
I'm actually thankful that you did that I didn't. So puts it in perspective on my own art. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of perspective is needed on this question, Sam, because
God.
my
There you
word.
go.
Kevin Kestis asked you this question, Sam. He put, if you had unlimited time and budget, what's one visual idea you'd love to expand on in Lost Records?
Mm.
On
So you have
Lost
to imagine
Records
Michel's come to
specifically.
your office and he's like, Sam, bang, he's put the money bags down. He's like, 2 money bags. He's
Breaking
like,
Bad
right.
enough money. Yeah.
Jeez, what would I like to expand upon? I feel like for me, I would have. I think this is like divisive amongst the fans. For me, I would have. I loved the slower moments in episode 1. For me, I just loved
Mm.
chilling with the girls so much. It was like such
Yeah.
a nice thing. I felt like I was genuinely becoming friends with them. I don't know if you guys have played the Persona games, but Persona 4, when I played that game, I felt like I was like besties with those characters when it was over. And it was way more about just the chill moments with the characters than it was about all of the action gameplay that was happening. And yeah, I feel like if I had an unlimited budget, I would love to somehow give the player the opportunity to opt into more of that in other spots in the game, build out other parts of Velvet Cove where yeah, you could just like go and chill with your besties, make more music videos, hang out, explore the forest, other things like this that maybe, aren't directly tied into the narrative. And it isn't, to be fair, the structure of the
Mm.
type of game we're making probably you couldn't plug this thing in seamlessly and have it work, but I just would love some opportunity to just chill more, like maybe, I don't know, you instead of like a traditional new game plus, you just like after you finish the game, you can like go hang out in the garage and explore the rest of Nora's house and just like, I don't know, hang out with your buds. And it's not like an opportunity for plot. It is just character moments and that sort of thing. I don't know if there's any one specific art asset that I would
Sam,
want to
do you
plus,
think
but
Do you think, for example, the movie pals might be an example because Michel's talked about the fact that he wanted it to be
Yes.
explored inside, but then budgets and constraints and stuff. He talked about it in an interview they did with Gone Gold. So do you think that could be a potential option for you?
yeah, I mean, I could imagine what I'm describing happening in there, right? What if instead of the movie palace having just closed when you arrive with Swann, it is just about to close and you do have the
Mm.
opportunity rather than putting your movie in the video slot, you can go inside the store and, maybe
Yeah.
wander around and yeah, decide what you're going to rent, or you come back in episode 2 and you rent a movie to take to Kat's room, or whatever it is. Yeah, just these
Yeah.
opportunities where there's more time with the characters in a way that potentially doesn't feel like mandatory, because like I say, I feel like this is divisive. I feel like some people really didn't connect with the slower moments, but for me personally, I loved them. So yeah, that sort of, and that would be a great place for it. Yeah, imagine remaking like the equivalent of a small town blockbuster that you could explore as a player. It would be so fun.
Yeah.
It would be so cool.
No, like that's why I tell a lot of like indie game developers like out here whenever I talk with them, like, oh man, I wish I could, like, and they compare themselves to other games, but just like time and budget, it's just like you can't compare yourself to triple A. I give
Mm.
the example, like one of my like standout idols is Olivier de Riviere, with his production on music, more specifically South of Midnight, Plague Tale. Here's the difference, though. He has many different musical directors. He is at recording, mixing, and mastering at Abbey Road Studios. So
Yeah.
he has, like, that's what I mean, dude. It's just like I can compare myself, but I record and mix and master here. There's a Pokemon blanket. That's pretty much that's pretty much my
Yeah.
budget. So yeah, like I think a lot of people might say like, oh, I wish we could have. And then even developers, the artists will say, I wish we could have, but time and money is just,
Yeah.
and deadlines, they're just a thing. And it's just you do with what you can. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to keep things within concentrate. Like one idea can spawn off into a million ideas, and me and Adam have done that when we've done like things where it's like just one idea of a podcast spawns off into millions of subtopics. So
Yeah,
I
of
completely
course.
relate to that. So Kevin's asked here, this is final question from Kevin, at least from the Patreon. Is there a specific color scheme you like to work with?
Ooh.
Oh, it's funny because like when I work in my own art, I don't consciously do this, but people often say this, and yeah, especially when we started teasing early Lost Record stuff, a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's so obvious that you're working on this." And I had worked on a film before, probably like 2021, called Intergalactic, which is like an animated feature film that's on Netflix. And the same thing, when that came out, so many people were like, "Oh," like even before they knew I worked on it, they reached out after the trailer dropped and were like, "You must be working on this." And for me, like I guess, but again, it's not a conscious thing. I feel like if you scroll my Instagram though, if you just sort of blur your eyes and roll the page, you're gonna see like a lot of cool blues, light purples, and like really saturated teals, this sort of thing. But yeah, it's not like I have a palette that I start with. It just sort of oftentimes, I guess, ends up there unintentionally.
Yeah, I just noticed there's a poster right behind you, isn't there, for Intergalactic?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the vinyl from the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at the trailers right now, and I'm like, okay, I see it. Yeah, especially the purples. I would say, can I guess your favorite color?
You can.
Can I say it's magenta?
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, I feel like that's in a lot of my art. I don't know. Again, I just feel like it's not intentional, though. I guess it is like the subconscious part of my brain's favorite colors, because I'm not actively choosing to do it, but often it is there. So it must be there for a reason, even if I'm not, entirely clear why.
That's funny.
Sign of an artist. So final two questions. This one's, well, you can choose which one's more difficult. So imagine you're at the end of this production and Luke Baghadoust comes over with a box and he plants it in your desk and he's like, "Sam, this is the Bloom and Rage box." And you're like, "Yes, I know it's the Bloom and Rage box." And it's like, "I want an item to go into this box." And we're locking away for 27 years. What are you putting in there?
Oh, what would I put in there? Oh, geez. I feel like for me, it probably would be one of my sketchbooks. Probably. I don't draw in my sketchbooks as much as I used to, but I still do. I always have one with me anytime I'm traveling, and especially when I'm traveling, I use it a lot. It's harder day-to-day life now. I think since COVID, pre-COVID, when I was commuting to work, I was drawing every single day in a sketchbook, and now it's harder to find pockets because I don't have that downtime where I'm sitting on a subway or something like that where I can doodle and collect my thoughts. But my sketchbooks also, they're as much journals as they are collections of drawing. Like I would say it's a 50-50 split of writing and drawing, maybe even 60-40, maybe more writing than drawing. So it is really, like catalog of what's going on in my life in words and pictures. And I guess, we've got something similar like that in the box at the end already. So maybe it's a bit of a cheat answer, but for me, I feel like that probably would be the most accurate thing. If I had to choose anything to put in there, it would be, one of my sketchbooks.
Nice.
Oh, I need the reference points so I can go and dig this time capsule up so I can get the book out there. Sam, why are they not giving you a book? They need to make you an art book for this game. People are like screaming for this.
Keep asking, keep screaming. That is all I will say. Please keep asking, keep asking.
That's it. I'm gonna scream at Michel after this and be like, "Give him an art book, please."
I just last week or the week before got the Jusant art book in the mail, and boy oh boy, what a beautiful book! It's so nice. Yeah, very very inspiring. Have you guys played Jusant? I can't remember if you've played it.
Yes,
Adam,
absolutely. Yeah, the
so
music,
good, right?
the sound design of that game is just for the budget of that game. For it to have that kind of sound design was just absolutely insane. I don't even think it was mixed with Dolby Atmos, and it just sounds like so good, man. Like it sounds so professional. So yeah, kudos to Jusant.
Yeah,
and with Edward Kaplan's artwork as well, which is always amazing as well. And
such an inspiration. Yeah, man, what a talented guy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Sam, to finally end up as well here as well, my final question, it could be the difficult, it could be easy, depends on the situation. So obviously, as I said, I was listening to that podcast and I thought it was fascinating just to kind of hear your perspective on artwork and just the way you do things and the way you see things as well. And I found a very interesting line that you said in there. It's just a paraphrase. You said, "I'm excited when I see someone in that art over a specific skill set." You're the art director on this project. Some of your colleagues, what did you see in that art that stood out in the game?
Like from other people, you mean?
Yeah, as you said, I think, as I said, it's paraphrasing. I'm excited when I see someone in their art over a specific skill set.
Oh yeah, when I see someone in their art, yes. Oh, that is, it's the best thing for sure. And I feel like we're just the right team size at Don't Nod where people aren't starting to get lost in the crowd, right? Like I feel like if you're working on something like Call of Duty, and no, I don't want to sound disparaging about that or anything. There's like a lot of really cool and very impressive, and like the scale, like so much cool stuff goes into making a project like that. But really, it's hard to see an individual amongst that, right? Because there are a lot of different cooks in the kitchen and a lot of different people you have to appease. And yeah, at Don't Nod, we're just a small enough team that we're able to see ourselves in the art. In terms of like, I feel like, I don't know, I don't want it to make it sound like I'm playing favorites, but I think when you look at the game, the thing that most people are going to connect with are our characters, right? I feel like they're really at the heart of the game. And, the world is a character as well. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like when people project themselves into the game, they're doing that through the vessel of Swann and Nora and Kat and Autumn, those four characters. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of time and effort spent from a lot of different people. But I feel like Michel, Jean-Luc, and Juliette in particular, really had such a huge, huge hand in bringing those characters to life. And I've heard you guys talk before about how, there are parallels between Swann and Michel, and I've heard him talk about that. And it's very true. You can see that. And I think, having realistic, believable characters in the game comes from real people's life experience that you can see in there, be it in small or large ways, right? Sometimes it's like, a subtle detail in the character art. Sometimes it's a line of dialogue, sometimes it's the way that they interact with another character or just present themselves into the world. In Swann's case, how she interacts with the world as well as the other characters, because she is a bit of a loner, And yeah, I think it, from my point of view as well, having worked with the team, it is probably easier for me than for the average fan to see where people in our project are sort of popping out and where it is just fiction, right? The line, I think, is probably a little bit more defined when you know the people who are responsible for bringing these things to life. So yeah, I think the answer for me is seeing how believable our characters ended up being, how people connect with them, how they're not just cliches, how they feel like real people to a lot of people. And I think a lot of that comes from, the people who are responsible for making the characters who they are.
Mm-hmm. And you can't, as Michel says, well, as paraphrasing, you can't tell a great story about great characters. It has to it's binary with the circumstance, and especially with this kind of game, it is very much shown. And Sam, obviously, me and Adam could speak to you for about 50 hours as well, same as we did with Luke and Michel. But I think it's probably more apt to wrap up here as well, because then we can get the podcast out for people. So I hope you all enjoy listening to this. Obviously, Sam, again, thank you so much for your time. It was amazing.
Do you mind if I just share some closing thoughts before we?
Of course, you can.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to have me here, especially for a game like this that is a predominantly a story-based game. That is the way it is presented to the world. I don't want to make it sound like people don't appreciate the art, but oftentimes when people talk about these kinds of games, it is for the narrative and the writing. So for you guys to take the time to spend a whole episode of your podcast, a couple hours each out of your day to talk about the art, something that obviously is like very near and dear to me. And I hope like in some of the things we discussed previously, it seems to be that the art is connecting with people and does sort of enhance the experience for people. It's just nice to have it recognized, because oftentimes it is like not the first reason people gravitate towards this type of experience, so I just really appreciate you guys reflecting on it and having me on here and having a conversation about it, because it's important to me. And I'm just thankful for the time.
I know.
We appreciate you back. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and we love speaking to everyone at our studio. But obviously, we love to speak to Juliette, for example, because we think she's fascinating for her work and the body of work that she's done. And obviously, we're trying to arrange interviews with Pippin at the minute to get Kat's perspective on the podcast. So, but no, it is fascinating to hear your story, because I think, at least from our perspective, when Adam wants to become a composer, that sometimes people overlook the other people that work on within the narrative and help bring it all to life as well. And so it's fascinating for us to talk to anyone who's been within these projects as well. So thank you so much for your time. And obviously we'll be 100% looking forward to seeing what you do next as well with Don't Nod Montreal and what the future holds as well with that. So yeah, guys, I hope you all enjoyed watching this as well. If you are new here, one more time, please do consider dropping and subscribe to the channel, turn notifications, like video, share your friends. And also as well, the Lost Records Journal is available on all podcast services. You can go and check us out over there. Go and follow us, go and rate us, go and download us. It helps boost our visibility on RSS feeds and everything else. And a big shout out to our Patreon subscribers as well for supporting us via Patreon. And I'm just trying to rush through because I just don't like doing the YouTube intros and outros too much. But thank you for all joining us here. Sam, one more time, thank you so much. You can find Sam on Blue Sky. He's on Instagram as well, so go and check him out. You can follow all his amazing artwork, and he's very active on there. And one more time as well from us, Sam, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure speaking to you as long as we did. It was just great podcast to have.
Well, thanks for having me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, guys, stay tuned. See you later. We'll hopefully have another great guest on in the near future. Take care. Bye.
Later.
See ya.